2, 3, 4. We had quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if commissioners could take their seats so we could have quorum and begin the meeting, please. Oh, there we go. We've got 6. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to Toronto Transit Commission Board Meeting number 2023. This morning, in our public session, there were no declarations of interest, and the previous meeting minutes were passed, so we can begin with an agenda run through and hold obviously the items where there are deputations or where there are going to be questions from commissioners. Number 1 I'll hold because we have a quick presentation, and number 2 and number 3, that's the CEO's report is number 2, ACAT minutes is number 3. Number 4 is the 2018 Accessibility Plan Status Update, and we have a deputant on that. The Wheel-Trans 10-year strategy. Do we also have a deputant there? No. On the Wheel-Trans 10-year strategy, questions of staff on that? Should I hold that? Yep, we'll hold that. Number 6 is Revenue Protection Initiatives Update, and we have a presentation, so that will be held. Item number 7, TYSSC Claim Settlement Update. I'll move the actions taken in camera. All those in favor? None opposed, that carries. Item number 8, the Danforth Garage Master Plan Update. Any public questions? Oh, we have a DEP, okay, thank you. Donlands Station, easier access. No deputant. We'll have someone move. Oh, she wanted to move it, you're right. Yeah, she did. Item number 10 is the collective bargaining agreement ratification. I will move the actions taken in camera. All in favor? That carries. Number 11, stakeholder engagement on the fitness for duty issue. I do have a motion. I can move it quickly. I don't know if people want to debate or discuss this. Commissioner Crisanti's got us moving here. And the motion is that the board reaffirms its support for the introduction of federal and provincial legislation requiring mandatory drug and alcohol testing in safety-sensitive workplaces like the TTC, and that the board's continued support for legislative change of this nature be conveyed to all stakeholders directly involved in this critically important public safety issue. So that is reaffirming an already taken board position. Yeah, we'll hold that. Hold by Commissioner Mihevc. Item number 12, we had a deputant who was withdrawn. That's the entrance connection to Dundas Station. We can move the staff recommendations. Moved by Vice Chair Heisey. All those in favor? That carries. Item number 13, we have a deputant. That's Chester Station, second exit. And item number 14, which is Lawrence West Station, we also have a deputant. Item number 15. You have a question? Okay, hold 15, which is design consultant services for easier access and second exit projects. Number 16, Relief Line South, systems design and management consultant. Moved by Commissioner Mihevc. All those in favor? That carries. Relief Line South, station design. Oh, we have a DEP on that. I believe Emily's on that one too. 18, elevator maintenance. We have a deputation on that. Number 19, supply of lighting and electrical products. Moved by Commissioner Crisanti. All in favor? None opposed. That carries. Number 20, market shops retail procurement authorization. Move staff recommendations approved by Commissioner Mihevc. All those in favor? That carries. Item number 21, changes to the code of conduct for members of local boards. This is an information item. Receipt moved by Commissioner Mihevc. All those in favor? That carries. Item number 22, there's a motion by Commissioner Mihevc and a deputant. The motion is to, there may not be a deputant, to defer to the next board meeting to allow for a fuller review and briefing of TTC board members. I would ask for a recorded vote. All those in favor? Byers, Mihevc, Heisey, De Laurentiis, opposed. Lalonde, Minois, and Cole. So that's been deferred. Which brings us back to item number, just for everyone's interest, we still have items number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18. Item number 1 was a presentation, and I'm pleased to announce that the TTC has been recognized as one of Canada's best diversity employers for 2018 and presented by MediaCorp Canada. The TTC, of course, is honored to receive this award that recognizes employers with exceptional workplace diversity and inclusion programs. Recipients have been recognized for successful diversity initiatives in a variety of areas, including employee programs specific to women, members of visible minorities, persons with disabilities, Aboriginal peoples, and the LGBT community. Winners of this award are diversity leaders in their industry and region of Canada. Specifically, some of the TTC's accomplishments in this area that garnered this award has been the TTC's commitment to providing accessible public transit and how they've maintained a dedicated advisory committee. So thanks to ACAT for that, of course, and all their work. Working with a number of community organizations, the TTC has reached out to female candidates through numerous initiatives, such as career fair attendance, mock interviews, resume clinics, speed mentoring, work placements, and partnerships with the YWCA, Career Edge, and MicroSkills. The TTC has also created a diversity and inclusion lens to help employees see different perspectives and consider the impacts of their daily decision-making with respect to the dimension of diversity. This is the first year the TTC has been recognized with this prestigious national award, and so congratulations to everyone at the TTC. And I'd like to call on Gemma Piemontese, Valerie Albanese, Karen Kosmowicz, Tamina Jafari, and Marika Fraser to accept it on behalf of the TTC. Congratulations. Thank you and congratulations. So we'll move on to item number 2, the CEO's report, and I'll ask our CEO to give some introductory comments, and then we'll move to questions of staff.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the board. I thought I'd start out my comments this month by pointing out, as I mentioned in the CEO's report, we've changed the look of the April report to more closely reflect our new corporate plan and to improve readability. As mentioned in January, we did not include operating and capital budgets in the critical projects dashboard in this month's report, as we're creating a new quarterly financials report which will be introduced to the TTC board later this spring. Our goal is to improve the quality and comprehensiveness of our reporting of financial information and bring it more in alignment with the city's financial reporting. As the city is taking the 3-month financial report to the May 28th Budget Committee, we plan to pre-circulate the TTC's 3-month variance report to the board in advance of that meeting for discussion at the June 12th TTC board meeting. I wanted to be sure that I addressed this at this meeting details of the funding that public transit has received from both federal and provincial governments. The CEO report provides information on the bilateral agreement announced by the federal and provincial governments on March 14th of this year. and that was also tabled as part of the province's 2018 budget. The provincial and federal government will invest $15.6 billion towards public transit investments over the next 10 years. It is anticipated that $8.9 billion of this funding will be directed to the City of Toronto based on a funding formula accounting for ridership at 70% and population at 30%. The provincial allocation is assumed based on a 33% cost share with the Government of Canada. City and TTC staff are discussing program details with federal and provincial colleagues and will report back once additional program details and requirements are available. I would be remiss, though, not to also mention the province's commitment to provide funding over and above the Investing in Canada agreement to support the construction of priority transit projects. The province will work in partnership with municipalities to nominate potential priority transit projects such as the Relief Line and Waterfront Transit. The Yonge North Subway extension is also identified. The budget has also committed to continue to work with the City of Toronto on the implementation of Smart Track. Another item to update you on is the fare gate installation, which was recently put on hold, as you're aware, for last month. We're now meeting on a weekly basis with Scheidt & Bachman and have come to a high-level timeline for fixing the three primary issues that I mentioned last month, those being the need to replace motors or motor functionality, the card tap and no-go or no-open issue, as well as ghost flapping. All new gates yet to be installed will have revised motors, and the existing motors are being replaced. With regard to the ghost flapping, the current options are a software upgrade or a PC replacement, and Scheidt & Bachman has already told us that they've placed orders for new PCs. We've put together a team of TTC and Scheidt & Bachman employees to target the most problematic gates and identify root cause and work on fixes. And finally, we look at to restart commissioning later on this month, and that's subject to a suitable support by both teams' technicians. We have about 10 stations remaining to complete the installation of the Scheidt & Bachman gates, and we intend to have that completed by this summer. Bombardier. Did I say it right this time? Thank you. Regarding the new streetcar program, Bombardier continues to improve on their performance. They met their target of 12 deliveries in Q1, and reliability continues to improve. And in fact, the average performance over the last 3 months is up 62% over the same period a year ago. We continue to improve on the various ways that we manage and resource this project as well. And this includes, we recently moved to bring a new project manager to have a dedicated resource to run the project while implementing the best practices in accordance with KPMG's recommendations in the Capital Program Delivery Review. We've added additional staff for quality assurance at the Thunder Bay plant as it ramps up and in anticipation of the opening of the plant in Kingston, so that we can do everything possible to help Bombardier get the vehicles here to Toronto. Lastly, we've also transferred resources and expertise from the Toronto Rocket team, and what we've done is reallocated or cross-pollinated some of the talent within the organization to help us meet the demands on resources without adding extra headcount to the project. Following discussions with the board last fall, staff issued a request for interest to determine the potential of other light rail and streetcar manufacturers to provide streetcars to the TTC. Following the release of the RFI, a tour of the Leslie Barnes facility was conducted in late October of 2017. More than 20 individuals representing approximately 10 manufacturers as well as sub-suppliers did attend. At our June board meeting, we're going to provide a report outlining a recommendation going forward which takes into account the challenges these manufacturers would face with meeting the technical requirements of our network and the critical timeline for delivering the vehicles in order to meet demand. On Wednesday, April 4th, moving on to the Fare Pass discount program, on Wednesday, April 4th, the Mayor, the Chair, and Councillor Mahavik announced the new Fare Pass discount program. The Fare Pass discount program will provide approximately 150,000 eligible adult residents who receive assistance through Ontario Works OD or the Ontario Disability Support Program ODSP with a 12-month discount on the regular TTC adult fare or adult monthly pass. This program is administered by Toronto's Employment and Social Services and is only available on Presto. So a single fare under the Fare Pass discount program will reduce the fare by $1, and the Fare Pass monthly pass will cost $30 less than an adult monthly pass. This is the first program of its kind, and this pass is a great initiative to help make transit more affordable for low-income customers. The U-Pass. At last month's meeting, the TTC board approved a U-Pass fare policy. And as we know, the University of Toronto students rejected the pass by 66%. More than 12,000 students voted out of a total population of approximately 40,000. A debrief was held last Friday with the University of Toronto Student Union president, is where they made us aware that we learned that the preference of students was the ability to opt out of the program rather than make the program mandatory. Ryerson University will be the next school to hold a referendum for this fall for a possible implementation of the U-Pass in 2019. This matter is actually going to Ryerson's Board of Governance on April 28th for approval to proceed to the referendum, and we'll work with Ryerson to assist them on promoting the U-Pass. I also want to provide you with an update on our progress with the Queens Quay tunnel barriers. We've been in communication with Waterfront Toronto and the City Transportation regarding the existing right-of-way as well as the new Waterfront Toronto project. Yesterday, we presented to the City and Waterfront Toronto staff a temporary bollard solution and a gate solution for our right-of-way. Staff have met with several gate manufacturers to date. We also conducted some traffic observations, and we spoke with a number of drivers who told us they were confused by the signage and the intersections as a whole. So I'll let you know that we'll continue to make you aware of progress as it is made. If I can throw it. What I'm going to ask is on page 56, there's actually a picture, and I wanted to ask if we could put it up. It's a picture, and I mentioned it when I was talking to the board in March. You'll see the photo of an incredible idea that was to warm streetcars in advance of going out in service, and those particularly frigid days back in January and February, even though lately it's been fairly frigid as well. And this was done to make sure that it made it a little bit more bearable for our customers and our operators as they took the vehicles out in service. And if we recall, in the frigid period of January, we were actually at our lowest point with the number of streetcars available for service. I'll move on if we can get it up. As well, what I want to point out in this month's report is on pages 59 and 61, we added a daily change-off chart so that you could see what we see on a daily basis, and that is the number of vehicles that are taken out of service for various reasons that negatively impact our customers' experience and the quality of our service. Last month, I mentioned the improvement in bus service for the bus customers shown on page 61, and the dramatic reduction and then change-offs thanks to the arrivals of the new buses as well as the retirement of the older fleet and the improved maintenance programs that were put in place. I'd say to you that as we continue with the new streetcar, I see a very similar pattern that will result. As of last night, I was made aware that the 69th streetcar will be going into service today. Scheidt & Bachmann is preparing to ship their 74th streetcar out. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah, Bombardier. Yeah.
Yours won't work.
As we roll them out with Bombardier, I see a very similar trend occurring there. So 69 streetcars in service as of today, 74 being ready to ship today to come on down from Thunder Bay. We have about a third of the fleet now here and in service. And in my discussions with Bombardier, it's solely focusing on the materials management distribution. And I know that I've been advised that they have enough material now through 84. So we're always forecasting out on the delivery of these vehicles. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you and the board. Oh, the photo's up. Thank you. Rich Wong and his staff in maintenance, now that the photo's up, they went to a local store and rented for a couple of weeks a number of portable heaters and left them outside the building and dragged the big tubes in and literally put them in the windows of the streetcars for about 15 minutes just to take the bite off of the inside of those streetcars during that really frigid weather. And it made it that much easier for our operators to show up, feel comfortable in taking the streetcars out in service and keeping the streetcars in service. historically, as I've made mention, that the older streetcars, when they get in service, a lot of times they'll have a freezing aspect. If doors don't open, wipers won't work because of the freezing. And this was found to help out tremendously. And he intends to put this in place for the future as well. So with that, I'll say thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Your questions, starting with Vice Chair Heisey, then going to Commissioner Byers, and then Mahevic.
So on Queens Quay, you've had some discussions with Waterfront Toronto. There's been an acknowledgement of driver confusion. I wanted to ask about another issue I've observed and I've been told about by TTC operating staff, which is pedestrians wandering into the LRT right-of-way and our operators having to slow down the vehicles because of it. So is that true? And have we been addressing that pedestrian transit interface as well as part of this review?
Go ahead, Scott.
Through the chair, yes, that is a known issue from an operations point of view, and it is one of the specific items that are being looked at by TTC staff, city staff, and Waterfront Toronto staff. Waterfront Toronto are prepared to hire a consultant to do some design work, and one of the things they'll be looking at is the installation and design of railings at key locations along the right-of-way to solve this problem.
Actually, it'd be a physical sort of cue to a pedestrian that they're in a different place.
Through the chair, correct. They're looking at railings between the streetcar right-of-way and the multi-use trail. They're also looking at reconfiguring the markings essentially on the roadway and on the trail and on the pedestrian crossings to more clearly indicate where pedestrians should wait to remove them from waiting right next to the streetcar tracks.
And can you give me some prognosis of timing for decision-making and then implementation? And how you see that unfolding? Right,
through the chair. It's a joint project being contributed to by TTC staff, Waterfront Toronto staff, city staff. Waterfront Toronto staff are taking the lead. They are going to fund the design and perhaps some of the installation. We've prioritized a number of the different things they're looking at, and one of the highest priority ones is to deal with the pedestrian markings at the pedestrian crossings. Waterfront Toronto are hopeful of testing out revised pedestrian crossing markings at one of the intersections this summer. And the expectation is that a design for the railings will also be available sometime during this summer. It's possible that we could do a temporary railing installation, but a permanent railing installation would probably take longer than this summer. So there's lots of work happening, and there'll be some trial installations if possible.
And when do we get the lift gate at the entrance to the tunnel? When does that happen? Because we know we get 2 people a month.
Through the chair, we're aiming for July to have that lift gate in. We're also aiming for sometime next week to have temporary bollards in at that York and Queens Quay intersection to better delineate the crosswalk and the traffic flow through that intersection.
Could you explain that? So they obviously don't interfere with the streetcar operation. So again, it'll be a physical indicator of where the right-of-way is to drivers? Is
correct. So there's 2 things there. So the lift gate will prevent the barrier, and then the temporary bollards, which we're hoping will become permanent over time.
Okay.
It will just better delineate where the pedestrians walk, and it'll be another visual cue for the drivers turning left and right.
Okay, next area of questioning, King Street pilot. My sense is enforcement has fallen off. Do we have a view of that as an agency?
So Toronto Police have recently published through the media the number of tickets that they've handed out. I think it's in the order of 3,000 to 4,000. The King Street Steering Committee, which meets monthly, perhaps even more frequently, have had discussions about enforcement, and I'm aware of speaking with Barbara Gray this morning that there have been very recent discussions with TPS in order to do another blitz coming up soon. But the enforcement continues, and I think the TPS needs our assistance in terms of helping them identify where we have particular problems, so we'll work with TPS in that regard.
Do we know what the status is of the province's consideration of photo enforcement for this kind of transit lane? Because I know that the chair wrote a letter to the province seeking that. Have we had any feedback as to timing on that?
We did receive a letter back. I don't have it in front of me. I can provide a copy. My recollection is that they are in agreement with the concept. We are actually having a working group meeting, which we committed to this board to conduct. I believe that is scheduled for Thursday.
Okay.
So the work continues. We're not as far along as we'd like.
And then finally, could you give us an update on passenger stats on King Street, sort of where we are most currently, and travel time improvements, if you're seeing the same amount of gain as you've seen previously, less, more, et cetera?
Jackie, do you want to take that?
Through the chair, the gain in terms of time has been slightly reduced, was slightly reduced last month. This month it went up by a little bit of a percentage point. Ridership, we just completed a riding count last week, so we don't have those numbers. They're being processed, so we anticipate they would be ready, let's say, mid-May.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Byers?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your report, Rick. I wanted to ask about the MetroPass sales. In your commentary, you mentioned that they're down 6%. I couldn't tell whether we're offsetting that fully with the equivalent on Presto yet, but 6% is not an insignificant drop. I don't know whether we've done any market research with our customers to understand why they're abandoning this fare medium. I don't know who gets that.
Through the chair. So I'll begin with, excuse me. Yes, the MetroPass sales are down year over year about 6%, which is roughly about 20,000 for the month. We are seeing higher average fares on our Presto usage, but it's not fully it's not a pure one-to-one relationship in terms of what we're ultimately seeing. We are doing continuing work to try to evaluate essentially what's happening and you know how those rides might be transitioned. So
in that additional work, can we reach out to former MetroPass users or to understand better? And I gather what you're saying, it's not fully offset by the equivalent Presto medium. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have Victoria, who you've met at the board, who does customer surveys and provides us with business insights, and that's certainly something that we can review and actually speak to customers as to why or why not they're using MetroPass.
Thank you. Track. So I guess this is on page 14. There's information about the multiple projects on track work ongoing, and it's not a glamorous area, but it's pretty important. I just wanted to get a sense of, and we do hear periodic stories about stoppages for water or grout or blah, 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 but are we in good shape on track? Is this it's a big area, it's fundamental, non-glamorous, but is it something we should worry about? Are you on top of it? Is it, yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Rich, you want to tackle this one?
So through the chair, we are in good shape with the track. There are some sections of track that we need to actually take out of service because track work is being deferred. I believe, I think it's Wellington. Well, Victoria Street. We're trying to bundle work with the city on that, so we will be taking that out of service pending a decision with the city on what we can do with that. But all the other areas, it's in pretty good shape. We have a pretty rigorous track replacement program that we go through every year. It does look busy, but for the most part, we're on target.
Okay, great. And thank you. Last question on the fare gates. I prefer to call them the Bachmann fare gates. So thank you for your update. I must say, so here we have a global player supplying, you know, a technical solution, and to have something like the motors be an issue, it's surprising. And so in your discussions with them, what's been their reaction to what's been gone on? I mean, it's concerning because this technology is all over the globe in transit systems. So I continue to be surprised and so I'm curious as to what they're saying about what's unique about Toronto that's making the gates fail here.
So try to answer that. We are having weekly meetings with the executive team at S&B and myself and with Jim Ross and Chris Salvador and key players in the organization. We have The motors are not a significant reason for the unavailability. It's obviously very concerning when you have something as basic as a motor that's not functioning properly. But with S&B, we feel we have enough float to replace as needed and also do some preventative replacements as well. So I think we're okay there. The ghost flapping is a PC problem. They're going to try and again, they're working with us to get us the PC supply chain so we can start replacing them all out, potentially. They also believe there might be a software fix there. And the tap no enter is still under analysis, although the PC problem may be the fix there as well. We've also, S&B have provided us with some pretty good data analysis around the specific failures and the gates that are failing, and we've determined that it's actually a core number of gates between only 26 to 30 that are causing a significant amount of our unavailability. So what we've done with S&B and ourselves, and our, which would be our stations group, our revenue operations group, and with S&B techs, is going to go around to each of those specific problem gates and come to the root cause and, you know, really target the solution for those gates. It could be gate replacement, it could be a motor in that instance, it could be a customer flow issue at that point in time, or we could have maybe some operational issues that we've implemented improperly that we should have addressed. So there's a number of issues we're working on. I really do think we've got a great partnership going forward, and they're at the table, and they want this problem solved just as much as we do.
Thank you. Commissioner Mihevc, questions?
Yes, thank you very much. I have two sets of questions. One is around ridership. I noticed that it is still under budget, and you know, I grant your argument that some of it is perhaps weather related. I am wondering though, and maybe it's to reiterate how we calculate ridership. Is some of the way in which this ridership calculated based on fares paid? Is that one of the pieces that feeds into the matrix that allows you to determine ridership?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So if there is, so you have a certain rate that you're calculating is basically not paying their fare, and that is plugged into the system, and if you are off by that, if you are underestimating, then the amount of rides might be predicted to be lower than actual rides. Is that a fair conclusion?
I don't know if you want to jump in.
I'm not sure I understood the question. If you could one more time, sir.
So fares paid is one of the features that is used to calculate ridership. If fares are not paid, is that, and if the percentage of fares that are not paid is underestimated, would that not lead to an underestimation of that figure, Ttc ridership?
So I think what we're calculating is our revenue rides numbers. We know that there's boardings which can vary depending on you know, their transfers, whatnot, which have an increase of the actual people that are on the vehicles themselves. But in terms of what we're reporting is strictly the revenue rides numbers.
On page 2, those are revenue ridership numbers. Page 2 of the CGM, those are revenue ridership numbers.
I believe so. Let me check. I'm on 21, but I'll check too.
Okay, page 2 is the summary numbers. So that would explain why very often we get pictures of folks traveling the system at 11 o'clock at night in jam-packed subway cars. Of course, then we get all kinds of stories of people at bus stations, streetcar stations that can't get on. Some of that might be a function of, frankly, ferry vision. Would that be fair?
Well, if for planning the service and issues around crowding and so on, that's done by ridership counts. So when we come to you and tell you how many people are on the bus, and then we plan the service accordingly, so dealing with, as we will be bringing forward to the board next month, a report on, you know, how we're going to deal with some of those capacity issues with the money that's been provided. That's based around ridership counts.
So what's page 2? Is page 2 about ridership counts or fare revenue ridership based on?
No,
fare-
page 2 is strictly based on ridership revenue,
On ridership revenue.
or revenue rides, sorry.
Okay, I'll speak to that in a bit, or maybe under another item. The federal government announced a big deal on the funding of public transit across the country. Will we be getting a report on reminding us the priority projects that they've committed to for us, how we're going to spend our allocation? I'm particularly interested, not just in the big, for lack of a better word, sexy projects, but also like buses and bus maintenance garages and so on.
Through the chair, yes, we're going to be reporting back on.
When is that?
We're continuing to work with both colleagues in the province and the feds, as well as some of our city colleagues, in finalizing all the
we get that
details and
next
being
month?
able to come back on it.
Can we get that next month? At least an update as to where you're at with it?
Through the chair, yes.
Great, thank you. And my last question is it over? Am I over? Is the delivery of vehicles. So we have how many different schedules have we had with Bombardier? I have you have there a 2002 schedule. I have here a February 21st, 2017 schedule. I'll even put it on the board. Here, that was from a year ago. Are there other ones? And is it possible so that we get a running tab of the changing promises? It's easy to be up to commit to deliver on a promise that has been watered down at least twice. At least twice. How many times has it been watered down?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the specific number of times, and we know that they didn't meet their commitment for last year, and we've readjusted the schedule this year with them, and with the intent of asking them not to overcommit on this year's delivery. With the opening of Kingston, they actually didn't take that into full consideration, although they tell us that they'll be delivering vehicles in Q4 of this year. The 64 to 65 that they intend to deliver this year is without taking Kingston into consideration as they ramp up with that facility and they address the materials management issues they're having today. So they're working towards Q4 to try to get ahead of a schedule as they move into 2019.
Okay, at the end of the day, though, for us to keep the metal on the pedal, it would be good for us to know the various schedules and how they've not tracked.
We can provide that for you in the next CEO's report.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, I'll let it go at that.
Great. Commissioner Fragadakis?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So on page 42, the report talks about converting the 505 Dundas and 506 Carlton to buses. Parts of both of those routes are heavily used by cyclists, and as the weather gets better, that usage will obviously increase. Streetcars and buses use the road somewhat differently, as I'm sure you know. So are any steps being taken to perhaps address how this conversion might impact cycling safety on these routes?
Well, we had the same issue come up last year when we replaced the streetcar service on Queen. So we'll have to work with our comms folks in terms of getting the messages out there that it is a different cycling environment. And certainly we provide the operators with lots of education, a lot of reminders, watch for the cyclists. We do that generally around this time of year, so that is absolutely something we'll be doing.
I'm not sure if you've had any conversations with your colleagues in the Transportation Services Department about this conversion. Just wondering.
Sorry?
Transportation Services, they're the ones that do the
Yep.
cycling infrastructure. I'm just wondering if there have been any conversations with TTC staff to Transportation Services staff about the conversion.
We would generally have discussions with them around when they change the infrastructure on a road where we're operating. I can't speak if we've had a specific conversation about the 505 and the 506, but we will.
Okay. Thanks. So page 33, line 2 delay incidents for February 2018 are about the same as in February 2017, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct. They appear to be very close.
So in the action plan for that item, it mentions two types of delay incidents, subway infrastructure incidents and door incidents. I'm pleased to see that steps are being taken to address them, but I was wondering if we know if they are down from February 2017.
So I think over 4 years since we've made our commitment to try to reduce subway delays by 50%, we have seen about a 45% decrease in subway infrastructure delays, track signals, power delays. I don't have the number off the top of my head for rail cars and shops and rolling stock, but rolling stock has also improved. They still, door incidents on T1 trains are still the #1 incident that we would have, but they are working. There's a number of programs for the smallest part to, we had a delamination issue on some roller bearings that we're working on. We've replaced all of the door channels, all of the pocket guides, motors. We've done all of those things over the 20 years we've had that fleet.
Okay. On page 62, it notes that 19 new RAM ProMaster buses were in service as of the end of February of this year. I was wondering what kind of feedback we're getting from riders about those buses.
Through the chair, it's mixed feedback. Some really enjoy the ride. They enjoy that there's a radio on board. The operators also enjoy the vehicle. It is tighter, so there is a change for the customers from the Friendly. It's just a tighter vehicle than they're typically used to. But I would say it's generally positive, but we are getting some negative feedback as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions? Don't see any. Anyone want to speak? Oh, questions? Commissioner Minwong, can you turn your mic on?
Just a question to Mr. Larry. Will you be cheering for the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Boston Bruins?
He doesn't have to declare a conflict at the beginning of meetings.
My blood is blue.
Good answer. What do you think?
Okay.
My blood is blue.
Anyone want to speak to this item? Okay, well, I'll move receipt. All those in favor? That carries. We're on to item number 3, which is the ACAT General Monthly Meeting for February 22nd. And if I could just ask the Chair, Raymond, just to give a few introductory comments to those minutes, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Chair Cole. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to now share the highlights from our recently approved February minutes. The Design Review Subcommittee provided feedback on the new tactile material used for raised print and braille on the new passenger assistance intercom panel. The subcommittee also reviewed the EC LRT Islington station at 90% design and commented on safety concerns and a need for consistency and accessibility throughout these interchange stations. The Service Planning Subcommittee reviewed 2 new transit routes to service southwest Etobicoke to meet the needs of the growing community in this area. While the vehicles and stops on these routes will be accessible, one of the routes, which acts as a shuttle to the Mimico GO station, will require customers to travel approximately 300 meters from the closest stop and is not covered. Since the Mimico GO station is not accessible yet, people using mobility devices are not recommended to travel on this route. The Wheel-Trans Operating Subcommittee reviewed the TTC Corporate Plan Branding Initiative called the TTC Way, and that subcommittee also discussed in detail the customer's experience on transit in order to capture the thoughts and emotions throughout a customer's journey on the TTC. And lastly, related to Wheel-Trans, we note that this month the TTC will be hosting a series of public meetings where staff will provide an update and request feedback on the Wheel-Trans 10-year strategy. The update will include more details on the expansion of the Family of Services pilot, access hubs, and the community bus pilot routes. Participants will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide input on each of these initiatives. These public meetings will be held in locations in different areas of the city and will, of course, include the participation of ACAT. And more information about those can be found on the TTC's website. That concludes our highlights for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll move receipt. If there are no questions for staff, I'll remove receipt of those minutes. All those in favor? That carries and moves us to item number 4, which is a good segue into the 2018 Accessibility Plan status update. We do have a deputation. Emily Daig is here. And is your mic on, or do you need a hand?
Hi, everyone. So, I was sitting there reading the report last night, reminding myself of what I was going to say today, and the biggest thing for me of this accessibility report is 3 things. Number 1, we've come a long way in the last 5 years. Number 2, the accessibility needs of people with disabilities are changing every day. And number 3, the TTC still has a far way to go. We've come a long way, and actually I'd like to thank our current chair, CEO Rick Leary for actually riding a bus with me last year. We were riding home, my husband and I were riding back from deputating about the Cherry streetcar, ding ding, and Rick rode the bus with us, and it was a really good discussion, and I got to show him a few little things I hate about the current buses. But for myself and for people that take the regular transit every single day and try our best to, there's a long way to go. A lot of us and people I talk with every day, and my friends I live near, because I live in a place where there's a whole bunch of us that use wheelchairs and that are multiply disabled, because technically I'm deafblind on top of being in a wheelchair, and a lot of my blind friends. And the big thing that we have a problem with is that we don't feel, in some ways, that the decisions by the board are not made at all times with accessibility in mind. They're starting to. But like you guys just got an award for hiring people with disabilities, well, those of us that know the TTC really well and that would love to be wearing a red smock and helping people, I've applied to the 3 companies and been told that I'm a safety risk in the subway because of my wheelchair. Well, why can't there be 2 classes of people down below and people above, and special events? So in that concern, the accessibility update is great news in a lot of ways. We finally have an elevator at Coxwell and Woodbine and different places, but we're still missing Braille wayfinding signs in these elevators. Coxwell's been live for 2 months, and we still don't have a Braille sign. It's still a piece of foam cardboard with printing on it. There's no Braille. We still have issues with keeping the Braille on the buttons at St. Andrew and other stations. We still have the problem that ACAT is still held in a place where those of us who are technically deafblind and those of us with sensory allergies have huge issues going to. We still have meetings held in a place where there is only 1 accessible washroom. The elevators still don't work for people with visual impairments. I still can't find my own elevator button. I still have to ask security to help me get up there. And it's in a space where not a lot of people with wheelchairs can come because there's a lot of seats. It's very cramped. We still have issues with bus drivers not asking us if we need to be secured or even bothering to get up and flip the seat. We're still having problems with bypassing of people in wheelchairs. It's pretty sick when people in wheelchairs get frustrated to a point where they sit in front of a bus. I've been sorely tempted. I've been screamed at by a bus driver. I've been passive-aggressive incidents from an operator. I've written in about it. I don't know what's gone on. Those of us who are trying to take the system, those of us who try to use the system on a daily basis, still feel that we don't have a voice. ACAT tries their best, and I thank ACAT. But so much emphasis is put on Wheel-Trans. so much emphasis is put on people who still use wheel-trans. I've had to nail streetcar operators because some of them don't come out at street level to let us off the streetcar. I've had to argue with streetcar operators and tell them it's a safety risk for me to come down or up that ramp without you standing there. Our wheelchair manufacturers, especially the electric wheelchair manufacturers, they haven't been included in, can these wheelchairs do these ramps? I've spoken to a lot of them. But one of the biggest concerns...
You could just wrap up?
Yes.
Just, you're at 5 minutes, and I know you're speaking on a couple other items too, so...
Thank you. And the biggest thing of all is people with disabilities trying to take the regular system. We don't feel we're being listened to. We still feel unsafe. And there's got to be still more attitude change. I thank you for the update. I thank you for your work. But there's a long way to go, and let's not give up. Let's keep accessibility in front of frame. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Anyone have any questions? No, they may for your other deputations, but we'll move to questions of staff. Any questions of staff to speak on the item? I will speak. I do have a motion. Obviously, I'm proud of how many stations we've made accessible and the way we've accelerated that to ensure that we're hitting our accessibility targets and in some cases surpassing them. One thing that ACAT brings to our attention, and we meet on a regular basis, and they bring this up all the time, is that there's still the question marks around Warden and Islington stations.
Absolutely.
Because of their very unique design, and admittedly because of the huge cost of how to rebuild the entire stations to make them accessible. Because we now have Create TO as a kind of a new, I guess, successor entity to Build Toronto, I just think it's important that we proactively reach out to them so that they're seeking redevelopment and development opportunities so that we can meet our 2025 targets on making sure that all stations are compliant with that legislation and accessible. So that's that motion. Any other speakers or questions of the motion? Mover? All in favor of the motion? That carries. All in favor of the item as amended? That carries. Thank you very much. That moves us on to item number 5, which is the Wheel-Trans 10-year strategy. We don't have deputants on this item. Questions of staff? Yeah, Joe, you held this. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Mihevik, you held this. Wheel-Trans strategy?
I think it was me.
Oh,
I mean,
was that side of the that side of the room?
You look the same.
I know. I'm flattered to.
Politically, we're the same.
Yeah, I'm sitting to the right of Joe at this point. I mean, the great news in this report is we have a lot of information about accessibility and the role that ACAT's playing, and this is terrific. And you know, and so I have nothing specific here on the report other than to say, you know, thanks for all the emphasis on it. It does feel, well, maybe my question would be, how do you feel the 10-year plan is going in light of some of the comments that you recently heard, and are there any things we can tweak, or any update in that regard would be just my question.
Through the chair, I think the emphasis right now on the strategy has been a lot of program building and internal work that we need to make sure that we're considering all aspects as we move forward and roll out. Indeed, some of the elements such as technology that we're rolling out, these are invisible right now to the customers until we go live with them, but a lot of work has had to go into even bringing those forward for rollout this year. Family of Services pilot that we did last year was important, particularly as a learning exercise for the TTC and what operational practices that we need to develop and implement. Starting to train operators, we were fortunate to train approximately 60% of bus operators, but we know that, and to Emily's point, we know that we need to get to streetcar. We know we need to finish the bus operator element, and that it really is the human side. So we're doing a lot of technology, a lot of procedures, but it's going to be the human side and the personal interactions that our staff have every day with our customers is going to be what makes this successful.
Thank you. If there's another question from Commissioner De Laurentiis.
Just a quick question on the Family of Services pilot. Maybe you could remind us whether we had specific targets in terms of the usage, how people used it, or the number of people that we would put into the pipeline, so to speak, or whether we're just at this point still collecting observations and information that we would use in the design.
So through the chair, our target was 1.5%, and we were able to estimate that we had approximately 49,000 trips, which is approximately 1.1%. Now that is an estimate that we were able to book ourselves. However, we know that some customers are booking themselves as well. So we could track what we booked for customers. We couldn't necessarily track what customers are booking on their own. We made a few assumptions from that, but so I'd say we certainly were quite close to meeting that target, and that we have further targets for this year.
Any other questions? Just one quick one, I hope, is just as recently as yesterday at a seniors building in my ward, you know, some of the kind of traditional complaints about Wheel-Trans service were brought up, and I just wonder if you can give some assurances as we're looking at modernizing and everything from dispatch to service and family services, that we're not in any way kind of taking our focus away from providing kind of the level of service we want to in the more traditional way we have been right now.
So through you, no, the emphasis is to modernize so that for those customers who want the independence to book their own travel, to use apps, we want to give that to them to be able to completely not deal with us at all or not talk to us personally except until they meet their driver to deliver them on their trip. Otherwise, then that will free up our staff so that they can interact personally on the phone. We know that our senior and most vulnerable customers do like the added support that our reservationists provide, and we're working to ensure that that can happen by freeing up those time and resources that customers who would really prefer to deal through technology with us can do that, and then we can dedicate more time and effort towards our senior customers.
But are we generally comfortable with the metrics we have around call wait times, cancellations, and those kind of areas that kind of always seem to be classic complaints?
So am I happy with the call wait times? No, not at all. It's not what we would like it to be. It's in excess of our call abandonment rate is in excess of 20%, and that's of grave concern to us. And again, it's to enable the technology to free up. We know that 50% of our trips are booked online, and that we would hope to migrate more and more customers in that direction. As far as other services that we can provide, though, we know that over 81% of our customers are seniors, consider themselves to be seniors, and we've done other demographic research on that, so we are working to further support them.
Great, thank you. Anyone need to speak on this item? No, I'll move the staff recommendations. All in favor? That carries. We're on item number 6, which is we have a presentation, but before we get to that presentation, we do have 3 members of the public here to speak on the item. We have Alan Ewell, Bill Worrell, and Sheila Pisey Allen. Alan's in the saddle already, so we will start your time. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Just give us a second. We're looking for help from above.
I'm speaking in my capacity as a TTC's resident, but not employed by the TTC expert on fare evasion. Most of the board will remember my fare evasion study from June of 2 years ago. Fare evasion on the TTC is basically the retail equivalent of shoplifting. For the non-professional shoplifter, it is a crime of opportunity. It is justified by the shoplifter by their perception that the cost of the products in that store are being overinflated or too high. During the November 28th TTC board meeting last year, 20 deputies spoke to the TTC's operating budget. 19 of those 20 deputies told the board that the TTC's fares were too high. Well, 19 of those 20 deputies were completely wrong and totally right. Our cash fare is the lowest in the GTA. Our monthly pass fare is the highest in the country. Now, some of you may be thinking that a deputation like this belongs in the Budget Committee or a report as part of the Ridership Growth Study. After all, this is a report on fare protection initiatives, not fare. But the first part of revenue protection is actually having revenue. Without revenue, the protection part is moot. The national average for a monthly pass is 36 trips to break even versus our 49 trips to break even. Ours takes 9 to 19 more trips compared to any other transit agency in the country to break even. As we retire our legacy passes and go to Presto versus pay-as-you-go, on Presto, fare evasion will increase dramatically and revenue protection will become completely, severely compromised. As a properly priced and marketed passes can work, though. Problem is, our fines are way too low. In the 57 fines you can get for being a bad passenger on the TTC, there is no escalation for fines for repeat offenders. So it becomes a battle of ifs. If I get caught, if I have ID to present to fare inspectors, if I get a ticket, if I take it to court and challenge it, if I lose, it's $235, which is $90 less, less than $90 more than just buying a Metro Pass by itself. Because of our current fine and fare structure, if I don't pay my fare and get caught every second month, and trust me, I'm way too sneaky to get caught that often, my total fines would be $1,410 versus a year versus $1,755, which is the amount I would pay if I bought 12 monthly passes. The net savings of not paying my fare and paying the fine every 2 months is $345 a year. So as long as the rewards for fare evasion outweigh the cost of getting caught, fare evasion will continue to be a problem on the TTC. I've already gone over ways to make our fare inspectors more effective, so I won't go into that again today. Without revenue coming in, there's no need for revenue protection. The cost of the monthly pass should go down and the cost for repeat offenders should go up. This will go a long way to improve revenue protection on the TTC. And remember, over 250,000 TTC passengers will ride our proof of payment streetcars today alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Byers has one.
So just on your math of evasion, and I know this is theoretical because you'd never ever dream of doing that.
I have a pass so I don't cheat, just keeps me honest.
But you'd need to, I mean, you're talking about going on 50 trips per month. You're talking about evading 50 times a month, roughly. I mean, surely our inspectors would catch someone who never, ever pays more than once a month, don't you think?
Right now, our fare inspectors, if you know the system well enough, you know that at Dundas West, when the school gets out, that's where they are. So you don't go to Dundas West when school gets out. Because there's a little too much predictability on when fare inspectors are going to be in certain locations, you can avoid those locations with pretty good accuracy.
Thank you.
Just one other question I have. In the comparator to the rest of the country, just offhand, are you aware of how many are transferable passes, or how many are kind of owner-occupied, so to speak?
Most of the passes, but not all, are transferable. Everything that's on Presto obviously is transferable.
No. When you can compare it to other
When I compare it to other agencies, like Halifax's Metro Pass, it's transferable as well.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay. We have our next deputant is Bill Worrell. Welcome. You make sure your mic's on, and I'll start your 5 minutes. You're good.
Thank you. One day in February, I was shopping in my local Shoppers Drug Mart on St. Clair near Bathurst. Upon emerging from the store, I saw the street filled with Toronto police cars, TTC staff vehicles, and uniformed personnel milling around. What was going on? Was this a mass shooting? A serious traffic accident? A terrorist bomb being dismantled? The sidewalk was filled with random spectators who had just happened to be passing by, all with similar concerns. Of course, it wasn't any of the above. The young black man who was standing in handcuffs, pushed up against a police cruiser hood, was very distraught, at times crying. When he was allowed to stand up, he drooped over as his backpack slid down to his cuffed wrists. Meanwhile, the officers were chatting amongst themselves, with the occasional joke being shared. My head count told me that the staff present were a combination of about 15 TTC and Toronto Police personnel. At the end of this episode, the young man was released and, without any assistance or support that I could see, staggered away. It looked like his headphones were broken. The crowd on my side of the street reacted in a variety of ways, from head shaking to anger. People were shocked by the TTC actions. Compare this incident to my 2 interactions with TTC fare inspectors. The first time, I had a Metro Pass to show them, and everything was fine. The second time, I had actually previously paid my senior's ticket, but I couldn't find my flimsy little transfer as proof of payment. Was I grabbed, handcuffed, thrown to the ground? Did I get an infraction accompanied by a very expensive fine? Did I even get a written warning? No, the inspector gave me a stern look and said, "Be more careful next time." In neither incident was I treated disrespectfully. So why this difference? One obvious answer is, I'm an older white guy. Is this how fare evasion is playing out, targeting the marginalized and the most vulnerable? I have met homeless folks who have 2 or 3, and actually at a meeting recently somebody told me they knew someone who had 10 unpaid fines. Not only is this ludicrous, it is unacceptable. Actually, it's outrageous. The TTC Commission is mainly composed of elected officials who are particularly concerned about serving Toronto residents by providing this vital public service. As elected officials, we expect the TTC Commission to be advocates for our cause, the cause of TTC riders. Instead of putting resources into more fare enforcement and building up a costly fare collection infrastructure, the Commission could be calling out the real fare evaders, the weak taxation system in the City Hall, the lack of support for operating costs from other levels of government. We urgently need to address the overcrowding and service issues plaguing our system right now. Instead of raising fares, as you have for 6 of the past 8 years, how about lowering fares for all? How about following the lead of some European cities who are planning for free public transit for all? Instead of managing an unworkable budget, can we count on the TTC to advocate for us? Can we have a system where those who most urgently need public transit get the best service? Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our presenter? No, thank you for coming. Thanks for your presentation. Next on our list is Sheila Pisey Allen. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm here, many of you will know I'm part of TTC Riders, but I'm here today to read a statement from a different organization because their members couldn't make it down. And that organization is Jane Finch Action Against Poverty. And they've submitted this deputation in written form, and I have other copies, but they asked for it to be read out loud to the board. So Jane Finch Action Against Poverty is a resident-led grassroots coalition of community residents, activists, workers, and organizations working towards the elimination of poverty. They're also known as JFAP, so I'll use that abbreviation. JFAP issued a statement on February 22nd, 2018, condemning the violence by TTC fare inspectors and police officers towards a young black man on February 18th, 2018. We sent our statement to the mayor, TTC authorities, police services board, and all city councillors. In that statement, we highlighted that this egregious violence was totally unjustifiable and showed that racism, in particular anti-black racism, by TTC fare inspectors and Toronto police officers continues to be a reality in Toronto. We demanded that the TTC and Toronto police stop targeting and violating the rights of young people of color. We're writing this deputation to remind the city that we have not yet received a response on this, although we realize that one inspector was suspended since then. We once again emphasize that this was not an isolated incident, but an instance of chronic systemic oppression and racism in this city. Jane Finch Action Against Poverty once again demands the following. 1, an immediate suspension of all fare inspectors and police officers that violated the fundamental human rights of the young black boy who was the victim of their racist and cruel act. 2, a public apology by the TTC, Police Services, and Mayor of Toronto. 3, an end to racial profiling and targeting of racialized and poor communities by police and TTC enforcement officers. We also support fair compensation for the young man who was assaulted. The city must stop criminalizing TTC riders immediately, especially its discriminatory practices of targeting young and racialized community members. Instead, we need a fair and just TTC system where people can easily access public transit and afford fares. We are calling for fully funded lower fares, better TTC service, and free TTC for riders on social assistance and low incomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? No, there are no questions. Thank you for coming. Thanks for the presentation. I believe on this item we do have a presentation from staff, so before any questions of staff, we'll begin with that. Just get things set up.
Good afternoon, Chair Cole, members of the board. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice this afternoon. The purpose of the presentation this afternoon is to give a high-level update to the board on our current revenue protection initiatives being undertaken by members of my transit enforcement department. Obviously, the highest profile program we have in place is the fare inspection program. We're going to go through the quick agenda here and speak to the current state of fare inspection. I'll move on to proof of payment support that is currently ongoing from special constables for fare inspectors in the field. The Presto audit program, which we implemented several months ago, where fare inspectors are in the field testing Presto devices and onboard vending machines. And I'll conclude the presentation with other revenue protection initiatives that are ongoing primarily by my special constables. So to give you a quick overview of the program from its inception back in Q3 of 2014, the fare inspection program is currently staffed by 69 inspectors, and they're covering all streetcar lines during all operational hours, 24/7. At the inception of the program back in 2014, we saw a fare evasion rate of about 4%, and we have achieved a evasion rate of 1.8% today. Bear in mind that these statistics are related to streetcar data only. Sometimes it gets confused with the overall bigger picture of evasion on the TTC. These rates that I'll go into in a slide or two are specific to the streetcar network. The transit fare inspector deployment model, pardon me, is reviewed weekly, and we adjust that on about a weekly basis based on the fare evasion data that's generated by the actual inspections. Back in 2017, at the end of the year, we had reached our target goal of 4 to 5% inspection rate for the streetcar ridership. Give you a quick walk through some statistics which really tell the story and the evolution of the fare inspection program. Pardon me. 2015, when the program started, those of you that were on the board at the time will recall that we went through a several-month education period as our new streetcars were starting to arrive, and our fare inspectors and station staff, customer service ambassadors were doing quite a bit of public education, including a leaflet program being distributed to our customers on the street and on our vehicles. We saw initial evasion rate of about 2.5% with an inspection rate of 1.7%, overall 938,000 inspections. Bear in mind, as we progress through the next 2 years, the coverage of the program expanded from 4 or 5 lines initially to the entire streetcar network in January of 2016. So in 2016, at the end of the year, we saw an evasion rate of 3.1% on the streetcar network. Our inspection rate was up. Obviously, we had more resources out there performing the inspections on more lines, and our final number of inspections was 2.27 million. 2017, it dropped to where we would like it to be. Obviously, we'd like it to be 0, but at 1.8%, we feel that that is a relatively fair number. Our inspection rate was right where we wanted to be before, between 4 and 5% at 4.3%, and we had a total of 3.68 million inspections. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that this is actual data. So this is actual inspections that are being performed by my team, compared against ridership data and actual enforcement measures, which could be a verbal caution, a written caution, or actually a provincial offences charge under the TTC bylaw. So with respect to our enforcement options and our cautions, you'll see again it tells a bit of a story as the program progressed through the years. Bearing in mind, again, staffing levels increased over the years and the number of lines we were covering increased to the current state, which is all of the lines. You'll see that the verbal cautions have gone up and down. And just to give you an example of when my fare inspectors may issue a verbal caution, those would be in circumstances where there was maybe an education piece required. So, customer didn't necessarily understand how the system worked. They may have had their fare in their hand, but they weren't sure how to pay it on one of the new onboard machines. Written cautions, again, a little more serious with respect to the enforcement piece, but no fine. However, again, this could be a situation such as the person had boarded the streetcar, not tapped their device, not tapped their Presto card on a device, perhaps, and when they saw the inspector's board, proceeded to a Presto device and tapped. Tickets issued, obviously, the inspectors would have to prove the facts and issue in court to substantiate a conviction in circumstances. I would like to draw your attention, and I would respectfully disagree with one of the deputants with respect to there's no escalation in fines for repeat offenders. Actually, there are several remedies available to both my fare inspectors and my special constables for repeat offenders. So the set fine chart that was displayed is the set fine schedule that the TTC falls under, is issued by the Senior Regional Justice. However, for repeat offenders, we also have a remedy of a summons, so that would compel somebody to attend court in front of a justice of the peace. Basically, in plain terms, they would be given their day in court to explain their actions. And then there's a second level of summons, which is also available to both my fare inspectors and my special constables, and that's what we call a Part 3 summons in the business. And we use that sometimes to send a specific deterrent to somebody that may not have the means to pay a fare or pay a fine. And so the court has several remedies at their disposal, such as a period of probation or a monetary fine, which is on an escalating scale. Under a Part 1 summons for the bylaw, I believe the maximum fine a court could impose is $500, and I believe under a Part 3 summons, the maximum fine that could be imposed is $2,000. So there is escalating remedies. Very rarely does it reach that level. Most repeat offenders, in my experience, are served with a period of probation, generally the terms of which would prohibit similar or related activities while they're on the TTC. Excuse me. So I'm going to move into some of the other initiatives that now involve my special constables. So some of you may recall my predecessor gave a presentation to the board last year when we were rolling out a plainclothes initiative involving special constables, where we partner a single special constable with a team of fare inspectors out on the system, and basically the role of the special constable in plainclothes is to perform observations. So they would be generally on board the streetcar ahead of time as the fare inspectors would board at certain points along the route, and if a situation resulted in an interaction with one of our customers or an investigation regarding the allegation of non-payment of fare, Special constables were simply there to either assist if it escalated to the point that that intervention was required, or to either clarify what actually happened on the streetcar in plain terms. So if there was a dispute over whether a customer had tapped a fare or a device was not working or something of that nature, in most cases the special constable would be able to either verify the customer's story or advise the fare inspector team that in fact they weren't being truthful. In my introduction, I spoke to the Presto audit program that currently the fare inspectors are involved in. When they go out onto the system to perform their inspection and related duties, beginning in March of 17, as the slide says, they are tapping Presto devices as they go along and testing the devices not only on our vehicles but also in our stations, on our legacy fleet and our new low-floor streetcars. The results of these are distributed to the appropriate TTC stakeholders daily, and we're keeping track. And again, this is real data. These are actual taps that are performed on the streetcars. And throughout the system where we have a Presto device. So the results of this from March to the end of 2017 show about a little over 100,000 test taps, 2,000 unsuccessful taps, which simple math tells us that we had about a 2% unsuccessful rate on our Presto devices and readers and gates. Again, that's real data. We all know that we're experiencing challenges with our new fare line construction, and we have a few locations throughout the system where either the fare lines have not been installed and the opportunity for fare evasion is a little bit higher because, quite frankly, there's no physical barrier there. So what we're doing to support our stations team in a lot of these locations is sending a fare inspector team, generally sometimes it's special constables or a combination of both, depending on, you know, crowds. Is there an event happening in the area, as an example, down at Union Station? And we're providing not only customer service and education, but we're also providing a highly visible deterrent to evasion at those locations. Special constables, as we've done historically, are deployed throughout the system based on a variety of data that we receive from various sources. Sometimes we get observation data from station supervisors and other members of the TTC. We get customer service complaints through our customer service department, where other customers see, you know, what they perceive to be high volumes of people walking in through bus bays and other locations. I can tell you from personal experience, having been in this business for over 20 years, that a lot of that is anecdotal. I've stood for many hundreds, if not thousands of hours at subway stations across the city and watched people enter, and in a lot of cases they've got valid fare media, but they have chosen to walk the 50 or 100-foot distance to their bus rather than go through a subway station in inclement weather or what have you. And in the vast majority of the cases, personally, I've experienced, it's a perception that people are evading a fare when in fact they have some means to pay or have already paid a valid pass or transfer. Obviously, that's going to change a little bit as we move system-wide with Presto fare lines. Into some of the projects that we do on an annual basis. The Project SURF stands for Student Education Ridership Focus. We've been doing this in various incarnations for many years. Generally at the beginning of the school year, we know historically where the troublesome spots are across the city. And again, we rely on data that we receive from our various operating divisions and our station staff to assist us with the most effective deployment. One of the pieces to this is that we engage directly with the school leadership if it happens to be in the area of a school, and we seek their support in you know, not only messaging to the students through assemblies and other means that they communicate to the student bodies now, but in a lot of cases they will actually engage with our special constables out at the bus stops, and so that they perform or provide a visible presence as well to the student bodies to discourage fare evasion and disorderly behavior. The bus stop program, which has been brought to the board's attention in the past, is one that I'm particularly proud of. Having started at the TTC about 30 years ago as an operator, I can tell you personally that I would have appreciated the uniform support of special constables or security team many times when I was an operator. The bus stop program was born out of a need to try and reduce the number of assaults against our operators, and it's actually performs twofold. The other objective of the program is to provide a highly visible deterrent to fare evasion along the various lines. So my people, my special constables specifically, are deployed based on crime data that we receive again from various sources. We get reports from operating and supervisory personnel, as well as electronic data that we receive, because we expect our operators now not to engage in fare disputes per se. We expect them, and they've been trained to activate the fare dispute button on the CIS communications console, which sends data to transit control, which we collect on a monthly basis, and we use that data to deploy to areas where we have high percentages of fare dispute activations. So again, as I stated earlier, we not only perform a support role to the operators who may be experiencing difficulty with troublesome passengers and large groups of people at various places across the city, but we're also performing a highly visible deterrent and public safety role for our customers. Some results. This program started in February of 2017, so it was almost 12 months, and we boarded just shy of 1,500 buses, 828 hours actually spent on 25 lines. The safety talk piece that I haven't mentioned yet is part of the program. When my officers are deployed out into the field at the various operating divisions and across the routes, they begin the detail by actually going into the division and interacting with the operators and answering any questions, interacting with them, getting information on troublesome areas along the specific routes, and giving personal safety talks as well to mitigate the assaults that unfortunately are occurring against our operators. Some results up to current date. I apologize, a little hard to see on the graph there, but basically it's a good news story. We have consecutively seen reductions in offenses against our employees, and in this case it would be our frontline operating staff from the inception of the program back in February of 17 to the current date. And that concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Commissioner Mihevc and then go to De Laurentiis.
First, to the gentleman giving the presentation, what do our fare inspectors do when it is clearly a case that someone is in need and does fare evasion? Say someone who one might see as a homeless person, or what would be the protocol there?
So I'll be coming back to the board, Commissioner, in June to present a more holistic annual report on the department and our training and some of the outreach programs that we're involved in. But to answer your question, my fare inspectors are given a very broad, latitude of discretion. We do quite a bit of training in areas of mental health awareness and dealing with people that are living with other challenges. I mean, I would say that, again, using the cautions and the escalating enforcement remedies that are available to us, I wouldn't want to mislead you to say that a charge would never be laid, because that would be misleading. But I would say that we would exhaust all opportunities to educate the person. Again, the variables that they look at is what's the time of year, right? If it's 30 below, we're not putting somebody off into the elements. The other piece to that, and again, I'll explain in more detail if you wish in June, is we have connected with several city agencies which provide various support through our outreach program as well. So there is a referral piece.
How about the teenager who kind of tries to get on fare evades and then argues that they got to get home and they're broke?
Again, I expect my people to act through what we call the lens of a pyramid of accountability. Basically what that is I ask them to look at something before they take any type of enforcement action. First of all, the safety of the passenger, the customer is paramount. Obviously, if it's at night, if it's the weather's bad, their discretion is going to be much broader than if it's a bright sunny day and the the customer isn't generally at risk. But I expect whatever they do to be lawful, first of all. I expect their actions to be reasonable. I expect them to be necessary, and most of all, I expect them to be acceptable. So sometimes it's a challenge, as I'm sure you can appreciate. We're trying to deliver a message that we need a robust fair inspection program in the public interest and in the interest of the TTC, and we do need at times to address, general and specific deterrents and send a message that if there is a bona fide need, we will provide transportation in most cases. I guess in plain terms, it's a judgment call based on a constellation of factors.
Okay, my last question is, we have a report from Malates that argued that the fare evasion rate was 4.32%. You're saying it's 2%. We're betwixt and between. Would you be willing to subject yourself to a third-party audit to verify your numbers and test them against their numbers?
So I'm not exactly sure what the data says there, Commissioner. Is that system-wide fare evasion data, or is that specific to streetcars? I suspect it's system-wide, but I can't see.
It's the last page, second last page. Yes, it's system-wide.
So my data is specific to streetcars, and again, I think it's pure data. It's actual inspections, it's actual counts that are being conducted by my team.
So the question was, is that an audited number? Like, it's one thing for you to say it, it's another thing for an auditor to say it.
I'd be agreeable to that, but I'm confident in the data because it's actual data.
Probably win that debate then. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner De Laurentiis?
Of the fines that we levy, what is our record of collection?
I can speak to 2017 numbers. I don't have the actual numbers in front of me, but when I reviewed them last, the court imposed approximately $610,000 in fines, as I recall, and they actually collected a little over $1 million. And the reason for that disparity is that it's not uncommon for justices of the peace to grant defendants that are convicted of a bylaw offense time to pay. So it's never really current, but those are the numbers from 2017. I can't actually tell you, I mean, that's the best answer I can give you right now. It was a little over 1.1 million collected.
And do you have a sense of what we would spend in order to both monitor fare evasion as well as collect the fines?
I mean, I can tell you what my budget is for the fare inspection program, if that's what you're asking me. I mean, I don't know what the overall cost for fare collection, revenue collection is. My total budget for the fare inspection program is a little over $6 million, labor and non-labor.
Just as I hand it over to Commissioner Byers for questions, I'll just sneak one in. But we don't collect and we don't receive the funds.
That's correct.
Correct? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Byers?
Great, thank you. Just want to understand, so the data you gave us is on the streetcar only, not bus, not subway, correct? So the 1.8 and the 4.3?
Through you, Chair Cole, that's correct.
So when the observation, I'm curious, because I've heard in passing that when inspectors get on that, people say, see them and, you hear tap, tap, tap. Is that, which would frankly means the actual rates are higher than what you're inspecting. Do your observers see that? Do your inspectors hear that when they get on vehicles, that people do actually tap when they see them?
I would say generally yes. I mean, certainly the anecdotal and observational evidence I got from the special constables that I get regularly when they're performing the plainclothes function is that there does seem to be a perceived, a high level of perceived potential evasion, certainly. One thing that our customers are good at, though, is telling my fare inspectors if it's safe to do so, that so-and-so in the yellow jacket didn't tap. So we do rely on that evidence, I'll call it, from our customers.
So there's some rats out there. Okay.
Correct.
My term. Streetcar versus subway. and I don't know whether this is, I'm just curious, would we expect the evasion rate on subways to be less because there's a much more intensive fare, taking aside the gates for the moment, but it's, you have to go through a medium to get on the subway, which is, there's no open door. So would we expect rates on subway evasion to be less, for example, than on streetcar?
Through you, Chair Cole, I don't have the exact answer for that, Commissioner, but I would expect so.
Okay.
That was the design. The fare line was designed to be the barrier.
Last question. On page 5 of your slides, you talk, there's data there on cautions, verbal and written versus tickets. And I was kind of surprised. So on that slide, 45,000 verbal cautions, 7,000 written. I don't know whether that's over the year or what period of time, and then 12,000 tickets. So in other words, like over 4 times the number of warnings to actual tickets. So curious, it surprised me how high that is. Thought there'd be a higher ratio of tickets per se. Will that ratio change as the inspection system becomes more mature? Do you see it staying there? Just curious on that data.
Through you, Chair Cole, I would imagine that it would. I mean, again, based on the fact that I expect a reasonable level of discretion to be exercised by fare inspectors based on the fact that, we all acknowledge that we're experiencing challenges with the new fare system. I would imagine that number will go higher. I mean, again, the verbal cautions they're issued in most cases where there's an opportunity for education.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fragadakis.
Yes, thanks very much. So my question it really is about the kind of training that some of these transit enforcement professionals have. I mean, we have a mobile crisis intervention team with the police divisions in my area, and they're partnered up with Toronto East General Hospital, or Michael Garron Hospital as it's now known as, and the police are especially trained to deal with people in crisis, and they're partnered with a mental health nurse. And I'm just wondering about the training of our transit enforcement people to deal with people in crisis. While I appreciate that people who are the fare inspectors may not actually be there to do other things, but to inspect for fares, sometimes, like in February, they come into contact with people and and I'm just wondering about the training, and do they have appropriate training, and can they get appropriate training? Because we seem to have more and more people experiencing various issues. The population is living longer. People have early stages of dementia, Alzheimer's, and all sorts of other things. So I'm just wondering about their training.
So I'll never say that there's not room for improvement, because I certainly believe that there is. I'm an advocate of lifelong learning, and I'm proud to tell you, it's an interesting question that you asked, because I have recently created an outreach officer program, and most recently, within the last week or two, they've engaged with Toronto Police to gain more knowledge on the mobile crisis intervention team model. So that's something that I'm definitely going to be looking at, most likely for my special constable team versus my fare inspection team. For incidents like that, Commissioner, the fare inspection team, I do believe, receives top of the mark training, and they are trained to basically observe and report either to a special constable or a Toronto police officer who has a higher level of training and the ability to get our customer the assistance that they need.
Right, so they're not completely trained to deal with people with emotional issues, though.
The fare inspectors receive at least 5 days of training in mental health awareness in people that are perhaps living with addictions and other challenges. They are given a familiarization on the resources that are available to them in the city, but I would be untruthful if I told you that they're actually referring people directly. That is generally left to either Toronto Police or my special constables.
Okay, so perhaps we can chat offline about what's possible, what can be done, so that they can get perhaps more training as appropriate, given that our system is large and our people come into contact with a lot of citizens in this city.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Questions from Vice Chair Heisey.
I was interested in how our experience on fare evasion compares to other systems. So we've been doing it 3 years. There are other systems that have had this kind of system for longer than us. What percentage does Vancouver have, Amsterdam, whatever, where there's proof of payment?
Through you, Chair Cole, Commissioner Heisey, I don't have hard data available in front of me here. I can certainly get that data to you in the future if you'd like. I can speak anecdotally to some of the benchmarking that I've done with our peers in the Greater Toronto, Hamilton area, and Ottawa and Vancouver. Specifically in the province of Ontario, the implementation of the fare card, Presto Fare Card, has been challenging. I don't think that's a secret. That's not unique to Toronto. Certainly my peers at Metrolinx and OC Transpo in Ottawa have communicated that to me. Again, I apologize, I don't have hard data. I know one of the measures that has recently been taken within the last year, I believe, in the province of British Columbia, is they've actually hardened their fare evasion legislation to make it a provincial offense in certain circumstances now, which provides for different remedies over and above that which are available for bylaw enforcement.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may follow up on that answer. There was a lot of discussion when we initiated the proof of payment system back a few years and what the best practices were in the industry. And as you recall, we had a lot of discussions about how many fare inspectors were necessary at the time. Right? The round number that people were talking about was around 100. And what we did is we were very clear that what we needed to do is find the data, all right, and get the numbers. All right? Our intent was to have an inspection rate of anywhere between 4 and 5%, with a fare evasion rate of under 2%, because we all recognize in the industry there's an element of society that just can't or won't pay. All right, and so that was the target. So I'm sorry, Mike, would we say 69? Are we up to 69 right now when it comes to fare inspectors? And so what we did at the time is we explained to the board that we know once the Presto card becomes fully operational, all right, it takes an inspector a little bit more time because he or she has to tap each card as opposed to doing a lot of the viewing. So we're going to watch that very closely as the Presto card goes up, what our needs are for staffing at on the locations and on the vehicles. But that's the industry standard in North America that we were looking at when we initiated the proof of payment process.
That's the industry standard for monitoring and sort of a goal for paid versus unpaid, but I guess it would be useful, we don't need it today, but sometime maybe in a CEO report we could get some, that might be something we could report on an ongoing basis with some measurement based on other agencies that have a mature system, which Presto is not.
Absolutely. The former CEO and I had a lot of discussion about that, having come from different parts of the world as a sense. So our numbers were relatively the same, but we'll get that information for you.
The last question I had, it's actually sort of, when you sit on this board, people come at you with anecdotes. So one anecdote I got was a friend of mine, their daughter is a teenager, and they claimed they had a Presto card, they were on a streetcar, and the reader that was accessible to them, they couldn't get to it. It didn't work, pardon me. And they got a ticket when they walked off the streetcar and hadn't paid their fare. And I'm sympathetic to the problem.
Just lean towards your mic.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to the problem for both the fare inspector and the kid involved. I can see both sides of the problem. Could you comment on how you address that, or can or can't? Because I can foresee circumstances, many people complain to me that there might be one reader that doesn't work and they can't get to the one that does because there's such a crush of people between them and the reader. So do you have any observations on that that might help my friend's kid?
Through your chair, Cole, I mean, again, at risk of repeating myself, I mean, I do expect my fare inspectors to act with a certain level of discretion, bearing in mind the challenges that we're experiencing with Presto, bearing in mind at different times of the day the crowding situations. But what I do expect them to do is do their due diligence where they can, especially through the audit process that we're currently involved in, right? So obviously they're not writing every single streetcar, tapping every single Presto device in the system, but they should have a higher level of awareness than the average person or the average TTC employee even on what devices are working and what aren't. If it's a valid, explanation for not tapping their card, then I would expect them to use their discretion and maybe issue a warning. I mean, again, based on the totality of the circumstances, a decision is made whether it would be a bylaw fine or a caution. And obviously, all of our customers who end up with a bylaw fine do have the right to challenge it in court. Not a very good answer.
Other questions? Speakers on this item? Commissioner Mihevc, can I have a motion?
Yes, thank you. And let me say first, I appreciate that that good friends can sometimes disagree on this matter. I do have a motion that I've given and I've given it a lot of thought, and it is really to support staff. We are in a transition period between the legacy system and Presto, and I think most of us have had enough experiences on the TTC. I'm practically a daily user unless I'm on my bike or walking. Of the system, and I chat with a lot of people. I chat with drivers. I chat with fare inspectors, and with the due respect to our staff reporting here, I do think that the evasion rate is higher, and it costs the system dearly. I would argue, yes, of course, I would argue that if you're on OW, ODSP, right now we've got $1 off. I look forward to the day when we say $2 off, and eventually saying that if you're on social assistance, that it's really that you get a free ride, perhaps in the off-peak hours. It would be free if I had my way about it. If I had my way about it, it would be that we get more money from the province. We get any money from the province to support our income. But that's not the world that we live in. 70% of our revenue comes from that fare box. When we did the CEO's report, pause.
Hold my time. For a sec. No, you have to flip the switch.
Chat and lead up to it.
Okay. When we did the CEO's report, we note that our number of passengers on our system seems to be on a slight decline. And that's because we count people that are paying their fares. That's the way, that's one of the inputs in how that is calculated. What that means is that if you're on, I'll use my streetcar, St. Clair, and enough people are cheating, instead of getting 26 vehicles during the morning peak, you'll get 25 vehicles, or you'll get 24 vehicles because it looks like people aren't riding the system. So it corrupts the whole integrity of the system to not have people pay their fares. And I'm sure many of us, I talk with young people as well, and they're like, when did it become okay to say we allow each other to cheat, to basically take away from the common pot? If I find that my child has stolen something from the corner store, they go back and they return it. And you know what we should be saying as leaders in this community? It is not right to cheat the TTC. And too many young people to me have said to me these days, and other people as well, say, no, if I can get away with it, I try. Because it's not hurting anyone, you're just taking on the man. Well, it's not okay to do that. It hurts us all to have a weak TTC. So I think that, once Presto is in, yes, it will be better when Presto is fully implemented, but between now and then, I think we need to do a little bit more education and a little bit more talking to one another, saying it's not okay to cheat the TTC. That's our job here while we sit here. Yes, we need to make provisions for people who can't afford it. Yes, we do need to do more training for folks who deal with vulnerable community members. Absolutely, we need to do that. and as much as possible to provide them incentives to use the TTC and not let their lack of monies be a disincentive to getting on the TTC. Yes, that's part of the picture, but as long as we have a system that counts on the fare box, we need to protect that revenue from that source. That's my position, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Questions of the mover? Other speakers? Commissioner De Laurentiis to speak.
While I appreciate the sentiment behind Commissioner Mahavic's motion, I would say that this is the sort of matter that is kind of nitty-gritty to management, and I would expect, I think we've heard management's plan, and I would say it's up to management to determine whether more staff is needed and to bring that case to us, rather than us asking them to do it.
Want to split the vote? A separate vote.
Okay. Other speakers? Commissioner Byers.
Yeah, appreciate the presentation today. I mean, this is a difficult issue. I do think we're all on the right, I agree with Joe's point that, it's culturally, we're all on the same team here. And we're in a period of transition, changing fare media, changing technology with gates and whatnot, and there's struggles and it gets out there. I'm very confident we're going to get to the levels that we need to get. So, just encourage your additional work, encourage your sensitivity with the community. You heard some comments today, and I do feel you get that, but thank you for that, and, keep doing this great work, and we'll get the rates to where we want them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I was going to ask that.
Sure. I'm just going to speak first. Just to Commissioner Mahavic's motion, which I'll support. Item number 1, I know staff is supportive of that, and they're ready and prepared with just through kind of existing head count to be able to provide those additional fare inspectors and get us closer to the point where we can deter some of that behavior. It's interesting, in almost every meeting we have, and certainly I think Vice Chair Heisey mentioned we get a lot of anecdotal, and people walk up to me quite regularly. We're told 2 things, that my bus or my streetcar, the system is packed, and we're also told the exact same time of these meetings that our ridership numbers are down. It just doesn't add up. And I think for most people who use the system, I'm lucky I travel a lot at off-peak, but even at off-peak, it's pretty busy out there. And so I think an effort to make sure that we're inspecting, but also getting that real data is critical. And Commissioner Byers, I think, highlighted what the most fundamental issue here is. We are in a massive transition. People have been paying fares the same way in this city for probably 100 years. And so I think that the onus is on us is to do all the education we can to make sure that everything's in place to make it as easy as possible for people to pay, because this transition is lasting way longer than any of us ever anticipated or wanted. And so while we're in this phase, it's important that we take these steps. So there's been a request to split these motions. So we'll vote on them in order. So number 1 is the adding the fare inspection staff through in-year offsets. All in favor of that? Opposed? That carries. And number 2 is the TTC staff undertake a publicity education campaign on fare evasion. Cheating hurts us all. All in favor? Opposed? That carries too. The item as amended, all in, with the staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That does carry. Item number 8 is the Danforth garage. We have a deputant on our list who is Alan Ewell. While he gets set up, if there are staff needed to answer questions, just for them to be ready once we go into ask questions of staff. And if the local counselor is in the building, Councillor McMahon may want to join us. I'm told there are a lot of local councillors for this site.
This report says that we are getting a new library on this site. This is good for people who are in the ribbon cutting industry and those who are into books and the library board. This report also creates a new consolidated police station for 54 and 55 division. This consolidated police station will save the TPS money in their operating costs. But this is not a meeting of the Toronto Library Board. This is not a meeting of the Toronto Police Services Board. This is a meeting of the Toronto Transit Commission Board, and it is to the TTC and its riders that you have a fiduciary responsibility. TTC staff say they do not know the cost of these actions. Back in October of 2011, TTC knew the cost of transferring these parts of lands to build Toronto. For the record, it was a $7.2 million book value write-down and a loss of $495,000 in annual rent. Based on February's report on our retail strategy, 2017 rent was $5.1 million, or that piece of dirt cost us almost 10% of our rental income. We don't know the project cost to the TTC for this. This is a land deal that will add a library to the city and reduce administration costs to TPS. During the construction of the Leicester streetcar tracks, the TTC took on an additional $70 million in construction costs to replace outdated sewer lines. We needed the construction and the other city agency pawned off their work on the cost to the TTC. This set a precedent that we can be used now. The library board and TPS want to build on our land. This should come at a cost. This should be at no cost to the TTC, and the TTC should gain more office space than it currently has on this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? No questions. Thank you for your presentation. Questions of staff, beginning with, there are no questions of staff. To speak? There we go. Commissioner Fragadakis.
So I'm going to move the recommendations. I don't think there were any in the confidential attachment, but the ones that are here before us from staff, and just to say that there's been a very robust conversation with members of the entire community. This has garnered a lot of interest, this particular site in most of the East End, and what was agreed upon in terms of the amalgamation of the two police divisions and other uses for this site, including TTC, obviously, and the library is already on the site, and other things that the neighborhood would like to see that is being developed as well through the eastern section of the Danforth Avenue planning study. So I'm pleased to move these staff recommendations and support them wholeheartedly on behalf of my colleagues and the members of the community that came out for the many discussions that we had at the public consultations that took place both in East York and in the southern half of the 54-55 division district. And to take this opportunity to thank all the various staff across all the various divisions that came together for these meetings, and thanks again.
Thank you. With that, just kind of speaking slowly to see if the local councillor may show up, but it appears though she's not. So you've moved the staff recommendations. All those in favor? That carries. Which moves us to item number 9. And this is the Dawnlands Station Easier Access, held by Commissioner Fragadakis. I think she wanted to be the one to move this.
Yes, thanks very much. So I move the staff recommendations, and I'm not sure what to say, except this is 8 years in the making, and we have a consensus in the community as to the siting of the second exit for the Dawnlands Station. I hope the Greenwood one is as smooth as Dawnlands, because that one is about 8 years in the making as well.
Let's hope it's sooner. So you've moved the staff recommendations moved by Commissioner Fragadakis happily, and she'd like a recorded vote. All those in favor? Cole, Byers, Mahevik, Fragadakis, Lalonde, Min and Wong, De Laurentiis, unanimous. What did I say? You know what, I just looked at the nameplate. I mean, I deeply apologize for that. Heisey, Vice Chair Heisey. All those in, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. That passes. You're good?
No, good. Thanks.
Okay. The local councillor is happy with the Danforth garage, so that works out well. Item number 11 was held by Commissioner Mihevik. I think held partly because of my motion, but he may have questions of staff. Okay. So my motion is just reaffirming the position this board has already taken on the issue. There's been ongoing dialogue, staff to staff level, at the political level, at the provincial and with provincial and federal stakeholders, just to convey the importance of this issue. It's not just the TTC, it's a pretty unified collection of transportation, private and public sector companies pushing for this. And so that's why I move the motion to restate our position, although, yeah. To me or staff?
It's about the letter that, I'm not sure, let me see who signed it. Oh, Rick signed it, the acting CEO. It's just a quick question about the cutoff levels.
Go for it.
Well, sorry, I beg your indulgence.
No problem, and the appropriate staff will answer it.
Yeah, I was reading this letter with great interest because there seems to be some discrepancy about what we think are, or what we think and what others think are appropriate cutoff levels. And it says it's 25 NG, I don't know what that means, versus 10 NG. And I'd just like to know, where are we going to land? Because neither of them are, like, there you have some level of intoxication, if you, even at 10, but certainly at 25, that's hardly acceptable. So I'm just wondering, when do we get an answer or some kind of resolution on that? Or when do we expect to get some?
So, through the chair, the NG stands for nanograms, and that has to do with the concentration of the THC component that is in the cases that we're talking about, oral fluid saliva. The TTC's program is set with a cutoff of 10 nanograms. That is set in that fashion based on the expert advice that we have been receiving over the last almost decade now in relation to our program. This cutoff level predates the random testing program. This is a cutoff level based on the literature of scientific evidence and expert toxicologists, forensic toxicologists, and addiction medicine specialists can demonstrate likely impairment. That has been effectively accepted through the Superior Court Justice Morocco's decision in relation to the union's appeal for an injunction in the case of implementing random testing. That is juxtaposed with the proposed screening levels that are being proposed through Bill C-46 at the federal level that as we understand, the Ministry of Transportation intends to adopt in Ontario. What is being proposed, as we understand it, is a two-part test. It's a roadside oral fluid screening device, which will be, which is where the 25 nanogram cutoff comes in. Should somebody test beyond the 25 nanograms roadside, as we understand, they would be transported and be subject to a blood test because, of course, it's a criminal standard conviction, and the blood test will be it's 2 to 5. I'm not sure what the latest is in terms of what that blood cutoff would be. TTC has concerns with respect to the 25 nanogram screening on the roadside device being called zero tolerance because, of course, in our view, that sends a message that that the 25 nanograms is somehow indicative of impairment, whereas we have expert evidence suggesting, or confirming rather, that 10 nanograms is an appropriate threshold in that regard. So that is the distinction that you're reading about between the 10 and the 25.
I know, but if that's what they're saying that they're going to implement in Ontario for roadside testing, what does that do for our policy, like we now are like, have a policy that's more strict.
So that's exactly our concern. It is our belief, based on discussions we've had with folks in the industry and experts in the area, that the 25 nanogram cutoff may, this is our belief, may be being selected because of limitations with that roadside device, and be less about what experts are suggesting is an appropriate impairment cutoff. And we are seeking clarity. This is where we put forward this submission. Our hope is that by highlighting some of the challenges that these two different cutoffs represent, that the Ministry of Transportation, and we've recommended the Ministry of Labor, have some dialogue about that.
Well, it just seems to me then that we're being driven by the so-called technology's limitations rather than what's actually safe for the public.
So that is our perception of what may be happening, but we can certainly not speak to what is behind the ministry. We understand the ministry in Ontario, the Ministry of Transportation, is basing their actions on what is being legislated federally through Bill C-46, and the discussions happening at the federal level in that respect are based on information from I forget the forensic name, there's a center that has done some forensic research.
The Forensic Science Center.
And that is what it is based on. But again, based on the discussions we've had with folks in the industry and with some experts in the area, we believe this, again, is a function of the differing technology with an immediate roadside device versus the extensive dual laboratory mechanism that our testing program involves.
Well, I guess you'll keep us apprised of any changes, if there are any changes.
Yes, but we certainly agree there could be serious implications for our program should the federal government and the ministry, as a result, proceed in this fashion.
Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you. So on the motion, if it can be placed on the screen, all in favor? The motion, the item as amended, all those in favor? That carries. We're on item number 13, which I believe we have someone here to speak to. This is the Chester Station second exit, Peter Danson.
Go here?
Yeah. And if you just, once you get settled, make sure that the microphone in front of you is on, and I'll give you 5 minutes.
2 minutes should do.
2 is even better.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you for having me. My name is Peter Danson, and I'm here on behalf of Bonfield Construction Company. Our law firm represents Bonfield with respect to this matter, and we thank you for an opportunity to address Bonfield's concerns with respect to 2 bids that it had, and in particular the ones identified in a 2 reports of action with respect to the Lawrence West Station and the Chester Station bids. My younger brother, Tim, has already made a written submission. I understand you have those 2 letters. I assume they've been circulated, and he's detailed the position of our client with respect to these 2 bids and the concerns raised by our client. Today I just wish to add some additional comments to what's already written. It goes without saying that the TTC has a broad discretion in awarding public contracts. But that discretion, we say, while broad, is not unbridled and it's not unfettered. Discretion is a matter of law and good public policy. Needs to be exercised fairly and reasonably. And the TTC is a public institution, must safeguard the public interest, and to do so along those principles with integrity. It's our view that the exercise of discretion in the awarding of public contracts with respect to public projects, all things being equal, and when I say that, I mean the bidder is reputable, skilled, competent, and the bid is valid in substance. All things being equal, contract should go to the lowest bidder, unless there's something very extraordinary or exceptional in the circumstances. This is a reasonable expectation that's held by the public. It's not just the bidder's expectations. It's the public expectation. It's the taxpayer's expectation, because lots of money is at stake. And the integrity and the reliability of the bidding system requires it and should not be jeopardized. So determinations must be made fairly, reasonably, objectively, and not based on narrow technicalities or administrative convenience. It should be substantive. Now, Bonfield, with respect to these two contracts, had low bids, which involved savings to the Toronto taxpayer of in excess of $1 million. So the question becomes, on what reasonable basis is the TTC disqualifying Bonfield from being awarded the bids in question? I return to the phrase, all things being equal. There can be no dispute that Bonfield is a reputable, well-established, knowledgeable, and skilled construction company. It has a proven track record here in Toronto, the GTA, and throughout Southern Ontario. Next, there is no evidence that there was a material substantive deficiency or defect in its bid.
Sorry, are you deputing on both now, just because your 5 minutes has elapsed on this first item?
Oh, I didn't know I had 5 minutes on each item. I wasn't informed of that, but I've got, I think I may need a little bit more, but sure. I'm going to talk about both. I'm creating a general principle, and then I'll go to the specifics of each, if I may.
Okay.
So that deals with all things being equal. It's a reputable company, does good work. There's nothing wrong in substance with the bid. So we come to the Lawrence West Station. Here, the bid was disqualified on what we say is a technicality. It received notice, 3 days' notice to cure liens. The notice itself, in and of itself, is defective on its face. It was received late Thursday, after 4:30, and gave 3 days. That means Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That is an impossibility. You cannot cure or vacate liens in 3 days. Or 1 day, I should say, effectively, Friday. But even 3 days is unrealistic and impossible. The fact is that Bonfield cleared it in 14 days, completely reasonable when you have multiple and significant liens. So to use a 3-day defective notice to cure something that could only reasonably be done in 14 business days just seems to have some technicality prevail over substance. Next, I'll just deal with Chester. In this case, the issue was the bidder was to list 5 reference projects in the last 5 years. And it turned out one of them was not within that previous 5 years. You have Tim Danson's letter. He's named a 5th that was done within the last 5 years. So that defect, technical defect, was cured, or has been cured as of today. But the point is that previously, or let's put it this way, the addendum that requires 5 listed references of prior projects done in the last 5 years, that addendum, the purpose of that is to ensure that you have a bona fide, competent contractor bidding. And in substance, there's no dispute on that. Now, there's another bid that was even lower than Bonfield's by Vericon, and it was knocked out on the same technicality. If you accept the principle that these sorts of technicalities should not rule and prevail over substance, if Vericon has a valid bid and you assess it to be competent and capable of doing the job, it should get the contract, not Bonfield, because on the basis that the lowest bid should prevail. So all we're suggesting here is substance over form, substance over technicalities, and those are the principles that should be consistently applied today and going forward. We do not think that was what occurred here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your coming, your presentation. You have a question, if you don't mind just sitting there. Oh.
Sure. Actually, just wanted to, I just noticed that on item 14, the number 3 bidder, my son works for that company, and I have done legal work for them in the past, so
The good thing is we're not on 14 yet, so.
I was worried that we'd mixed them up,
Yeah, so
and I wanted to not get engaged in that, so I will leave the room when we get to 14.
Perfect, and you
I
can
thought
declare that.
I thought I dealt with both of them, Lawrence West and Chester.
Yeah, but we haven't dealt with it yet. So, any questions of our deputant? No questions. Thank you very much. Oh, there is, sorry. Commissioner Crisanti has a question for you.
Mr. Chair, though, I just want to clarify, are we dealing with both together right now? Or
No.
are we going to do 14?
The deputant used all of his allotted time at one point.
Okay.
So if you have a question about 13 now, I would ask that. If it's about 14, we should deal with item 13 and let Commissioner Heisey leave the room.
Okay, I have a question of the deputant here, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So thank you for coming in, Mr. Danson. So I just want some clarity on the submission of the bid that you indicated that the 5 references that were requested within that 5-year scope, which I understand from speaking with staff is a mandatory requirement. Are you saying that it was submitted as part of the bid process? The way it was supposed to be with the 5?
Well, there's a question whether it's mandatory, but obviously the staff takes the position it is mandatory. But the point is that in Bonfield's case, that defect, that is, there were 4 of the 5 were in the previous 5 years. 1 was not, it turned out. But we have now notified you, by way of a letter, that there is a 5th that was in the last 5 years.
I see. Okay.
But the argument is, given the purpose of this requirement, of 5 reference projects within the last 5 years. So it enables your staff and the commission to properly assess a bidder. Well, in the case of Bonfield, I can't speak to Vericon, but that can be done. But in the case of Bonfield, it's a legitimate construction company, does major projects all the time, and for the TTC in the past. So the fact that 4 or 5 met that requirement, and now we've added the 5th a little late, shouldn't be a stumbling block. I mean, that is just using a minor technicality to defeat a substantive. I mean, the point is, this is for the taxpayers. Why would you take a technicality, a small technicality, to defeat millions of dollars of savings for the taxpayer? That makes no sense.
Yeah, no, hey, listen, I would agree. We're here to ensure that we award a bid to the best company at the lowest price, and save as all the money we can for the taxpayer at the same time. But just one final question. Was that 5th reference submitted in time before any decisions were made? Do you know the answer to that?
No, to the best of my knowledge, the 5th, sort of the replacement of the one that was out of time, just occurred by way of letter that was submitted yesterday by Mr. Tim Danson.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? No, thank you.
Thank you.
So we will now deal with item 13, questions of staff on Chester. Okay. Sure. Commissioner Crisanti, go ahead.
And I believe, just give me a moment here. I think the question had to do with the 3-day notice. So were the liens?
That's 14.
I'm sorry?
That's 14? So
no. We're talking about the liens now. We're talking about, so which item are we on now?
we are on item number 13, Chester Station, second exit.
Yeah, you're right. I apologize.
So let's just because of the issue Vice Chair Heisey identified, let's deal with that one first. Recognizing we did ask some questions on both of these that were of an in-camera nature earlier this morning. So Commissioner Fragdakis to speak. And
yeah, I was just going to move the staff recommendations to award the contract and say thanks so much. So glad we're moving on at Chester, since construction should be getting started sometime this year. And we look forward to an accessible Chester Station that has a second exit and a nicely redesigned parking lot across the street from it when it's complete.
Indeed. Okay, so Commissioner Fragdakis has moved the staff recommendations. Question, we'll okay. All in favor? No opposed, that carries. Item number 14 is Lawrence West Station, where I know Commissioner Crisanti has a question of staff.
So we heard from the deputant that they had a 3-day notice. Could you describe the events and communication that took place between you and the deputant with respect to that? And because 3 days does seem, I'm no expert in liens, but does seem a little tight and unreasonable, particularly when we just heard it came over a weekend.
Sure. So the history goes back to this. In the middle of the contract, Bonfield had approached the TTC with respect to its holdback amount and asked for relief from the holdback, which was substantial, and whether they could replace to get the cash, whether they could replace the cash for a holdback bond. The TTC agreed to the holdback bond, which also then amended the contract that Bonfield negotiated with the TTC and required them to vacate all liens within 10 days, failing which the TTC would cash the holdback bond to put it in the same place it had been as if it had still had the holdback. So Bonfield was obligated on 10 days notice, not that the TTC has to provide notice, 10 days from the registration of the lien, Bonfield was to remove all liens related to A27-1.
So I'm not sure I quite, so they had 10 days notice?
They had original under the contract provision, they had 10 days to remove the liens. There were a bunch of liens at the beginning of 2018, some going back to November, some from January, some from February. TTC had asked them to remove the liens, and then on March 6th, the TTC wrote to Bonfield listing the liens and asking them to vacate them, which they should have already done. They didn't do it, and TTC asked for a schedule as when they were going to vacate the liens. The response from Bonfield's in-house counsel on March 7th was, quote, Bonfield does not intend to vacate any of the liens registered against contract A27-1. It was the next day that TTC issued the notice of default, providing them the cure period, which was 3 days. 3 calendar days. The TTC waited till March 14th before it took action and called the bonding company and called on the bond. The bonding company had 5 days to respond from March 14th. So we issued the letter on March 8th, but didn't do anything till March 14th, recognizing the weekend. The bonding company's lawyer called us the day before payment was due to the TTC and asked the TTC if we would consider an alternative to the cash payout that was owing. TTC, which would be vacating the liens. Within an hour of the call from the bonding company's law firm, the Bonfield asked if they could vacate the liens as well. They vacated those liens on April 3rd. So the time they had goes back to November, goes back to December. All of that time, they were contractually obligated to vacate the liens and elected not to. And on March 7th, they made it clear to us that they have no intent to vacate the liens. The period of time that the deputy is talking about is after the notice of default, was just the period to cure, which they didn't cure within that period of time, and only cured it April 3rd.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I will move the staff recommendations for item 14. All those in favor? That carries. Item number 15, do we have a deputant for 15? No. Item number 15 is design consultant services, easier access and second exit projects. Held by, was it Commissioner Mihevc?
Sure. Just a quick review. How many second exits do we still have to do? It's probably a question to Susan.
In 2000,
legacy projects that keeps on giving, generation after generation.
We've done 6. In 2002, we did a risk assessment by a third party and identified 14 high-priority locations that require second exit. We have now completed 6, including this one?
Approximately 6, yes. Almost there.
Almost at 6. I think Wellesley, we're waiting for the development to complete to get the one at Wellesley.
Scheduled for the last 8?
8 to remain, thank you, yes.
Do you have a timeline as to when they will be completed?
I will ask Jane Murray, our Chief Project Manager and Head of Construction, to respond.
We do have a detailed timeline on that. We don't have that in front of us today, but we can certainly send it to you by the end of today.
Sure, thank you. Okay, thank you. That's all. Happy to move the motion.
Blame Min and Wong for that too. Yeah, we will be. Okay, so the staff recommendations on item number 15 on the easier access and second exit projects is moved by Commissioner Mihevc. All those in favor? Any opposed? No, that carries. Item number 17 and 18, we have deputants on, so we'll start with 17, which is Relief Line South Station Design.
Hey everyone. I can't wait for Relief Line South. I live in an area where we're going to benefit from it. My question for it is, unlike current designs of stations, do we have any plans of having a second elevator, mainline elevator? The reason I ask this is because currently, most elevators in the stations, there's a single elevator that goes all the way to street. might connect at concourse with another elevator to go to the other side of the subway if it's not a central platform. And when these elevators are out of service, it makes it incredibly difficult for people like me to get around. As we have a Wheel-Trans 10-year strategy, as we have family of services, whoop, whoop, and also as we have people like myself who are multiply disabled but are trying to use the regular system. And in that area alone of Sumac Station, due to 30 March of Dimes clients living in that area, as well as 2 other projects within the vicinity, you're going to have approximately 80 people in wheelchairs in that area. Wheel-Trans knows my building well. My dream is to see us be able to use these stations and to be able to have the equal access as able-bodied people have. Currently, elevators are small, people fill them up, and we have to wait a couple of loads for elevators. That can take 15 minutes, 20 minutes I've waited. My other question is, if they put bathrooms in any of these stations, can we please have an emergency call assistance button put in the bathroom? I know many people, including myself, that have fallen in bathrooms. In fact, I knocked myself out in Downsview bathroom, well, Shepherd West, and had a seizure in there, and I couldn't call for help. These stations need to be designed. They're going to be 21st century designs. Well, why don't we make the accessibility 21st century? I read this report through 3 times, and there was only a little blurb on accessibility. How are we putting accessibility in the forefront when this station will be made accessible? No details as to who's going to do that and how we're going to award the contracts for 6.7, so almost 6.8 million contract. There needs to be accountability to the designers. There has to be accountability for people with disabilities. But most of all, there needs to be accountability by the commission, by the companies building these stations, so that we don't have happen what's happened at 407, where the elevator is currently out of service. And Dufferin Station, it's going down a lot too. And where currently the elevators don't even work, they're not even finished to go from the concourse to the buses at 407. And the sidewalks weren't cleared properly in the winter, not even on opening day. And those stations have been open since the 17th of December, and the elevators still do not work. There's no timeline, there's no accountability when these companies are going to get it working. And we need to think about this. Let's not go through the brouhaha of the Scarborough subway. Let's not go through the brouhaha of the RT where people like me have to ride in the doorway of the RT. We already know what a one-stop subway looks like. People with disabilities, because there is only Kennedy and STC. Let's not make the same mistakes in awarding contracts as we've done before. Let's build these stations properly. Let's build these stations with everyone in mind. And I can't wait for Sumac Station to be built, because you know what? It's going to take a massive load off stations like Yonge and Bloor, where it's simply not safe for people with disabilities to move around the platform at rush hour. Neither is Islington and stations like that. So let's do some very deep thinking here. Let's keep ACAT hand in hand as you're doing this. Keep ACAT in the front of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions. Thank you for coming for the presentation. Item number 17, Relief Line South Station Design. Any questions of staff? Starting with Vice Chair Heisey, then Commissioner Byers.
So actually, that presentation just reminded me of something I had thought of previously, which is that we should consider a policy of double elevators at transfer stations, new transfer stations. So have we ever thought about that or talked about that? And the reason I asked the question is I remember, like it was yesterday, when the St. George platform elevator was closed for months, and people with disabilities had to travel all the way around the U between Bloor and St. George to get to destinations because it was down. And I can see it, you know, at major stations, terminus stations, transfer stations, the need for redundancy strikes me as more apparent than it would be at a station that might have lighter loads. So is that something we've talked about, and could that inform the DRL, which I presume is going to have 2 transfer stations, one at the end and one at the beginning, I'm guessing. So could someone comment on that? How that could get into the mix?
Through the chair, in the initial prioritization of the stations, and we worked with ACAT on that, our focus has been on getting 1 elevator into each station location. We recognize that the interchange stations and some of the high-volume stations have a need for additional, and we have been considering an easier access 4 component, so to get funding to get into additional elevators at the end. That hasn't materialized yet. So at this time, the funding and the prioritization is based on 1 elevator for each location. As we go forward and think about those high volume and interchange stations, that would have to be the subject of a future budget request and future approvals.
So I guess there's 2 elements to that. One is that you could install an elevator. One is you could design to allow for the installation of an elevator, and I presume the cost difference would be significant. It's a lot cheaper to put a subway, an elevator into a new build than to retrofit it to an old build. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. If you can do it at the time of construction, it's much more cost effective.
So how could we, as a board, sort of bring that idea back so that when we discuss the downtown relief line design parameters, that's something that the TTC could, the board could consider advocating for? That's not a decision for today, but we're starting fresh, and maybe it's something we should talk about with Scarborough, the Scarborough extension as well. Because I've been it's very evident to me that when you get to transfer stations, there's a real problem of lack of redundancy for people with disabilities. So any thoughts? I'm looking for feedback. Chairman,
I would suggest that we bring something back to you on that. And in addition, some of the locations such as St. George and Bloor-Yonge were very challenging to even get the 1 location in place. Bloor-Yonge is a challenge for us. We might need some time to look carefully at each location to make recommendations. And we should make a recommendation to you on the expansion projects as well.
I was thinking more of new construction, but you know, the larger principle I think is important.
Okay, I think your Commissioner Byers' questions were addressed by Vice Chair Heisey. I'm sure that's something we can bring forward, you know, even as a standalone motion to advocate on that issue. Other questions of staff as we move forward with the relief line? To speak? I think Commissioner Fragadakis wants to move the recommendations. There's 2 contracts today for building the relief line.
Let's get on with it.
Okay, very good.
Hardly wait.
All in favor?
I've been waiting a long
No
time. I remember
opposed.
when they first discussed it 30 years ago. Probably another 30.
Item number 18, elevator maintenance and repair services. We have a deputant. She is in her seat. I will turn on her mic.
Beat you.
It's on. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
This one's quite a unnerving one for me because we keep talking about Yonge and Bloor. The elevator between the Bloor line and the Yonge line, the only elevator between the 2 lines, is smaller than the elevators to the 2 towers here at City Hall. And it's the only elevator. 1 little elevator. And everybody goes in that thing. That's the one where I've waited 20 minutes. It's tiny. The only way a person in a wheelchair like me can get in there is drive straight in and then kind of elbow the button. So if you're visually impaired and in a wheelchair with that one, it's like, where's the button? Oh yeah. the big problem with the maintenance of the elevators is they keep going down. In fact, right now, I'm going to pull up the TTC website. Yeah. So VCC is down. And so is, Dufferin Station, street to concourse level, out of service. Elevator alert, Highway 407 station, concourse level to street level to Go Wire to Viva, out of service. Brand new elevator, out of service. Elevators for same station, elevators from platform to buses, not even working yet. So how can we give a contract to a company when the maintenance isn't being done? A lot of these elevators and station staff will tell you people use them for washrooms, for garbage cans. You don't know, I've seen needles in these elevators. These elevators break down. I mean, Coxwell has been open for a bit. It still doesn't have Braille wayfinding signage. It has a foam piece of cardboard on the window with the signage on it. No Braille. So where's our accessibility mandate there? St. Andrews Station. The Braille on the buttons is always ripped off. Where's our accessibility there? The elevators are so critical, absolutely critical, especially with people coming off Wheel-Trans who want to use this system. People who've not used this system, they have a certain path figured out, how they're going to get somewhere, and then boom, the elevator's down. Or they don't, or they're not like me and they have Freedom Mobile, so they don't have cell service in the subway. So how do they find out the elevator is down? And to read the alternate information, you have to have darn good eyesight. The alternate information and the proper information isn't even on the website. The alternative information needs to be in an accessible format for everybody. If an elevator is out of service, you're SOL. I've had the elevator at Shepherd West, formerly Downsview, be out of service when I've come down on a Viva bus. I try to poke the button to call the collector. The collector claims he can't help me. He can't see me. I tell him I'm at the drop-off elevator. He can't see me. Thank God that time I had the number to transit control, because that is the only way I got any help. And a supervisor came finally, walked me out of there, across the driveway for this station, and because there's no curb cut at the street end of the station, he had to beg a bus driver who already had people on his bus to pull away from the curb, load me from the road, go around and drop me off. That's inconveniencing other customers. That is absolutely embarrassing. It is absolutely critical that these elevators are maintained. I mean, even trying to find the information, if you end up going into Wilson Station, there's 2 levels. But the website doesn't tell you what routes are on the bottom and what routes are on the top, so you can connect to go where you want to go by bus. I've had to drive that roadway. We need to make it absolutely critical. I've been stranded at Broadview Station when trains were being turned back and there was smoke on the viaduct. And the collector couldn't do anything.
You could just wrap up, please. You're at 5
sir.
minutes.
This needs to be a critical issue. We need a better emphasis on these elevators. They're not last of importance. They're vital. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see that you have any questions, so thank you for your presentation. Any questions that commissioners have of staff? A question by Commissioner Crisanti.
Wrong button. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I see that recommendation one is asking for an award of close to $7 million over a 3-year period for maintenance of elevators. So we just heard the deputant. So this is extremely concerning, what we just heard, I'm sure, to everybody. And of course, accessibility is critical. Can you respond to some of this? Who, if we've got contractors getting paid good money to maintain and keep things operational, clean, safe, what happens when we hear stories like this? Where does it go wrong, and who's not doing their job? Whose question is that?
We got it right here.
Well, who will answer that one?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do keep track of the reliability of our elevators. It is published in the CEO's report. As far as what takes them out of service, we can come back with a detailed presentation on what are the things that fail. The key on this this report that's come forward to approve this contract is that we had 4 people who came in to hear about our standards, and only one ended up bidding, which is a company that actually is currently providing the service. We do, but we do track all of the defects, all of the minutes that we're out of service, and we're on that contractor to ensure that they're providing the service that our customers expect.
Did I just hear that you, so you put this out, a request to bid, and you only got 1 response? Is that
yes,
right?
That's correct. There was only 1 compliant bid.
Oh, compliant bid, but you had additional bids?
No, just 1 bid.
Right. You just had the 1 bid. Now, has this happened before in the past? You would think this is a popular maintenance of elevators. It's not rocket science. It's a lot of people in this business. Why only 1? How can we not get competitive bids?
As mentioned, I believe it's the actual service requirement that we requested. We asked the vendor to perform excuse me, emergency work within 40 minutes of a call and arrive within 60 minutes for non-emergency calls. So that's an important service element that not all the vendors could meet.
So have we worked with this particular vendor before? Do we have the confidence that they'll meet these requirements and address the issues that we heard today, and ensure that we have good, safe, reliable elevators working all the time?
Yes, and I can't speak to the actual maintenance schedule, but this was the incumbent contractor, so they have the existing business today.
Well, as the incumbent contractor, we just noted that there's some issues in some locations. How are they actually addressed, and how do we reprimand the contractor when he's not when they're not doing their job?
Well, there are remedies for non-performance in the contract that we could implement if necessary. If we do see the vendor not meeting his duties in performing the services required in the contract.
Well, we have our own supervisors that go around and also supervise the work the contractor does.
Yeah, that's correct. You can speak to that, Jim.
So the reliability scores that we attach to the CEO's report every month, Commissioner, are based on when an elevator goes down, and that is linked back to the elevator itself. It's not from the first report of that the elevator is out of service. So we are doing I think we're doing a good job of holding the contractor accountable for a quick response time, industry speaking, a quick response time, and for a decent maintenance program. Our elevator reliability is consistently in the high 90%. So notwithstanding that every customer is going to have a bad experience here and there, overall I think our elevator program is in good shape. The TYSSE is a bit of an anomaly, and I think this board is aware of the issues that we've had with elevators on TYSSE. But for most of our stations, I think reliability is very, very high.
And we could do better on the maintenance side, correct? Do you agree? There's room for improvement?
I would not, so optimistically, I would say that there's room for improvement in most things that we do. but I would not be confident in saying definitively that we can put a better maintenance program in than we have today. I would want to take that back to my my elevator staff and come back with that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Heisey, question.
Are we taking over the maintenance of the seldom working Queens Quay LRT elevator at Bay Street?
I knew it.
I can't help it.
If I may, at this time, it is still under the maintenance of the, of Oxford, of the developer that owns the adjacent building. We're still working with them to remedy and transfer that back.
You mean the company that wants to do the big real estate deal with us?
That's correct.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Commissioner Lalonde?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, our up times for elevators look like they're running in the 97, 98 range. What's normal? Like what's, if I was running a bank of elevators in downtown tower, would I achieve as good as that?
Through you, Chair, Commissioner, unfortunately, I don't know what normal is. I could survey our peers in the transit industry, major North American transit properties. I could survey major elevator users in the city of Toronto and come back or respond back to you individually, whatever makes the most sense, but I could bring that back.
The point that I was going to make is I think it's a high number. I think it has to be a high number because we operate single points of failure. So if you're in a bank of elevators in a downtown tower, if one elevator is not working, there's 4 others that are. We don't have that issue. But I think that this contract indicates that you're imposing a high standard because you only have one company that would even bid on it. Your standards are so high. I think what you need to go back and revisit is, you know, are there other things you can do to improve reliability that would allow you to get more bids for the service as opposed to effectively locking yourself into a single supplier?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or speakers? Would anyone like to move the recommendation in front of us? Commissioner Lalonde's moved the staff recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? I saw a few hands, I think, on that, so I'll take that. There we go. Before I move to adjourn, there's a very good chance I will be calling for a special board meeting for Monday to deal with the Oxford issue. So you may be canvassed. Yeah, you may be canvassed for times on that. So, motion to adjourn by Commissioner Crisanti. Always good for a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Take that as unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Sorry for being a pain in the rear end.
No, you weren't.
By the way, the bathrooms are interesting. They're not AODA at all.
But they're not like, they're built for nobody.
Oh, I know.